This is a list of 215 widgets. It covered the entire widget catalog and even more. In the description, you will find the timestamp of every widget. And if you need the code, well, it's also available in the description. But wait a minute! If you want to have only the best widget from this entire list, you can click the video on the top corner. And without any further ado, let me introduce you to 215 Flutter widgets. The About dialog widget. Inside the center of the application, we will have an elevated button. This one will have a child text show about dialog. The onPress will need to trigger the show dialog. This one take the context and a builder. The builder will return the about dialog. For this widget inside we have the application icon, the application legalese, the name, the application version, and the children. For this example, I will have a text widget inside the children. And with this, you have created an about dialog widget. You can see that you have access to view licenses, and this will display all the licenses for your application. This widget is usually used to display all the information of your app. The about list style widget. Inside the center of the application, I will have an about list style. Inside, you can have an icon, you can have the application icon, the application legalese, the application name, the application version, and a list of widgets called About Box Children. For this example, I will just have a simple text widget. And with this, you have a list style within your app that works like the About dialog. You can also see the license inside this one. This can be used to show the information about your application. The Absorb Pointer widget. Inside the stack widget, we will have two sized boxes. The first one will have a width of 200 and a height of 100. The child will be a simple elevated button. You can see on the screen that the button is clickable. This one will have a width of 100 and height of 200. The child will also be an elevated button, but with a different color. You can see that this button is also clickable. We will wrap this elevated button with the Absorb Pointer widget. And this will now absorb the click and the button is no more clickable. But the Absorb Pointer will work only on this elevated button. The other one will still work. The Alert dialog widget. Inside the center of our application, we will have an elevated button. This one will have a text Show Alert dialog. And when we press on it, we will show a dialog. This will take the context and a builder. The builder will return the widget alert dialog. Inside you can have the actions, which in this example we will use a text button with the onPress navigator.ofcontext.pop and a child saying close. You can also have a title inside the alert dialog. We will say Flutter map. The content padding will be a edge and sets.all 20. And the content will be a text, this is the alert dialog. With all this, you have generate this button and you have this pop-up when you click on it. This is the title, this is the content, and this is the actions. The Align widget. Inside the center of the app, we have a container widget. This one will have a height of 120 and a width of double.infinity. The color will be blue-gray. Inside this one, we have the child align, and the argument alignment will be alignment.top-right. The widget take a child, and this one will use the simple Flutter logo. With this, you can see that the Flutter logo is now aligned on the top right of the container. You can change the alignment for bottom left, by example, and you will see that the Flutter logo is now on the bottom left. The animated align widget. First, we will need to create a boolean selected set as false. Inside the app, we will have a gesture detector, and this one will have a non-tap function that sets state the selected to the invert of the selected. Again, this one is the boolean. The child will be a center with a container inside. The width will be double.infinity. The height will be 250, and the color will be blue-gray. The child of the container will be the animated align. For the alignment, we will say if it's selected, then the alignment will be top right, and otherwise it will be bottom left. The duration of this animation will be 1 second. You can also have a curve. This one we will use the curves.fast out slow in. The child of the animated align will be the Flutter logo with the size 50. And now every time we press on the gesture detector, the Flutter logo will go from one corner to the other. And the purpose of the animated align is to animate the transition between the alignment of the widget. The animated builder widget. For this example, we will need to import the Dart math, and we will need to add the width ticker provider state mixin. I will show you when we will use this one. With this, we can create an animation controller, call it controller. This one is an animation controller. The duration will be 10 seconds. And to complete this one, we need also the vsync this. This one is available only because we use the width ticker provider state mixin. So make sure that you have this one. We also want to make sure that when the animation finishes after 10 seconds, that we repeat the animation. As usual, when we use a controller, we need also to dispose the controller. So we will use controller.dispose. Inside the center widget, we will use the child animated builder. The animation will be the controller that we have created, and the child will be a Flutter logo with the size 100. The widget need also to have a builder with the context and the child. We can now return the transform.rotate. For this, we will need inside the angle, and the angle will be the controller.value times 2 times math times pi. And we have access to the number pi because we have imported the Dart math. Finally, we have the child, which is this one. This code will generate a Flutter logo that will rotate forever. But instead of the rotate, you can use also the scale and the translate. In this example, we have only used the rotate. The animated container. Let's start this one by adding a boolean selected set as false. The gesture detector will have the untap and the child center. The untap will set state and reverse the value of the selected. Again, the selected is the boolean that we have set at the beginning. In the center, we will have a child animated container. For the width, if the selected is true, it will be 200. Otherwise, it will be 100. The height will have the same logic. If it's selected, then it will be 100. Otherwise, it will be 200. The color of the animated container will be blue-gray if the selected is true. Otherwise, the color will be white. Now for the alignment, we will say if the selected is true, then the alignment will be center. Otherwise, the alignment will be top center. The duration of this animated container will be 2 seconds. We can also have a curve, which will be fast out, slow in. The child of the animated container will be a Flutter logo with the size 75. And you can see that when I press on the gesture detector, all the characteristics of the animated container will be animated. The width, the height, the color, and the alignment of the child. This widget is very simple to implement. The animated crossfade widget. We start by creating a boolean set as true. Inside the column, we will have multiple children. The first one will be a sized box with a height of 100. Under, we will have a text button. This one will have the onPress that set state the boolean to the invert of the boolean. And the child of the text button will be a text saying switch. This will be used to trigger the animated crossfade widget. The third widget inside the column will be the animated crossfade. The first thing we need to add is the first child, which will be an image. The second child will be another different image. And then you can use the crossfade state. If the boolean is true, then we will say crossfade state.show first. This will show the first child. Otherwise, crossfade state.show second. This one will show the second child. The duration of this animation will be 1 second. With all this, when you press on the switch button, this will animate a fade transition between the two widgets. Our two widget is only 2 images, but you can do this with any widget. The animated default textile widget. We start by creating a boolean called first. This one will be set as true. We have also a double font size, which will be 60, and a color that will be blue. Inside a column, we will have multiple children. The first one will be a sized box with the height 120. The child will be an animated default textile. This one will take a duration, which will be 300 milliseconds. The style will be a text style. The font size will be the font size variable. The color will be the color variable. And the font weight will be bold. This animated default text style will have a child, which will be a text saying Flutter. To trigger the animation, we will create the text button widget in the column. The onPress will be used to set state. Inside we have the font size. If the variable boolean first is true, it will be 90, otherwise it will be 60. The color will be the same logic. If first is true, then the color will be blue, otherwise red. And then we will reverse the value of the first boolean. The child of the text button will be a simple text switch. And now every time that you press on the switch, this will trigger the animated default text style. And you can see that the size of the text is animated, the color also, the animated icon. The first thing we will do is add the WidthTakerProvider state mixin right after the extend state. I will tell you why we need this later. Next, we need to create a boolean isPlay that we will set as false when we start, and a late animation controller, which we call controller. With this, we can create the init state, and inside we will say that the controller is equal to an animation controller. The duration will be 1 second, and then we use the vsync this. And we need the WidthTakerProvider because otherwise the vsync this will not work. I will put back the WidthTakerProvider, and then we will work on the dispose method. Inside this one, we will just need to dispose the controller when we don't use it anymore. Now it's time to work on the UI. In the center widget, we will use a gesture detector. The argument onTap will trigger a if-else condition. If the isPlay is equal to false, then we will say that the controller.forward, and we will set the isPlay as true. Otherwise, we will say the controller.reverse, and the isPlay will be equal to false. Forward means that we will have the next icon, and reverse means that we will have the previous icon. The child of the gesture detector will be the animated icon. Inside we have the icon animated icon.play pause. This is the first icon, and this is the second one. The progress will be a controller. This is an animated controller. And we will set the size at 100. If you restart the application, you will have a play pause button that is animated. This is called the animated icon. The animated list widget. We start by creating a list of items, and then we will create also a key that is a global key. This will be used for the animated list widget. We need to create a function to add items inside the list. First, we will say items.insert. We will insert at the index 0, and we will add a string item with the number of the last item. By example, it will be item 1, item 2, item 3. And because we don't use the set state, but we add items inside the same state, we will use the key that we have created, .currentState, and we will insert an item inside. We will add the new item in the index 0, and the duration will be 1 second. We need to create another function for remove the item. For this, we use the same logic, the key.currentState.removeItem. But in this one, you can see that we need first the index and then a builder. So we will remove the index that we have received from the argument, and we will create a builder. The builder will return a size transition, and the size transition is just used to make the item go smaller and smaller until it disappears. The size factor will be the animation that we receive from the builder. Then we have a child, which will be a card. We will add a margin inside this card, a color red, and the child will be a list style. In the list style, we will have the text deleted, and the style will be a font size of 24. If you go over remove item, you will see that you need also a duration. We will say that the duration is 300 milliseconds. Because we remove it from the current state, we need to remove it from the list also. So we will say items.removeAtIndex. Now we are ready to build the UI. So inside a column, we will have our children. The first one will be a sized box of height 10. We will have an icon button. When we press on it, this will add an item, and the icon will be icon add. Under, we will have an expanded widget, and inside we have the animated list. This one will have the key that we have created earlier. Inside we have the initialize item count. We will start at 0. The padding will be an edge and sets.all10. And we have the item builder. You can see that this one needs the context, the int, and the animation. So we will have the context, index, and animation. We will return again the size transition. This time we will use it to make the item go bigger and bigger until it have its final form. We will use a unique key for all of these size transition. We will have a size factor that is the animation that we receive from the animated builder. The child will be a card. Inside we have the margin 10, the color orange accent. The child will be a list style. The title will be a text, and inside we will have the index of the list of items. This will be, by example, item 1, item 2, item 3. The style will be a font size of 24. In the trailing, we have an icon button. The icon will be delete, and when we press on it, this will trigger the remove item with the current index. With all this, when we press on the icon button, this will add an item. And you can see that with the size transition, the item is going bigger and bigger until it have its final form. And if you click on delete the item, this will remove the item in 300 milliseconds. This is how you create an animated list with Flutter. The animated modal barrier. First thing we need is the import .async, and then after the extend state, we will use the with single ticker provider state mixin. I will tell you why we need this later. For this, we need to set up multiple variables. The first one is a boolean isPressed, set as false. Next, we have a widget animated modal barrier, an animation controller, an animation color, call it the color animation. And with this, we can use the override init state to initialize everything. First, we need a variable that is a color tween. This one will begin with the color orange accent with opacity 0.5 and will end with the color blue-gray with the opacity 0.5. With this, we can say that the animation controller is equal to an animation controller with the vsync this, and this is why we need the with single ticker provider state mixin. Otherwise, the this will not be available. We need also a duration of 3 seconds for this example. With the animation controller, we can create a color animation. This one is from the color tween.animate. And inside, we just put the animation controller that we have just created. The last step is to create the animated modal barrier. This one is an animated modal barrier. Inside, we have the color, which is the color animation that we have just created, and a demisable that we will set as true. With all this, we can start creating our widget for the UI. You can see that we have a center, a padding, a column, and inside the column, we have multiple widgets. The first one will be a sized box with a height 100 and 250 with a stack widget inside. In the stack widget, we will have the alignment direction center and a children. The first one will be an elevated button. The style will be color orange, and the child will be a text pressed. Now we need the onPress, and for the onPress we will set state and say that the isPressed is equal to true. This is a variable that we have created at the beginning. After the set state, we will say that the animation controller reset, and then we will use the same animation controller to forward the animation. And the last step is to use a future.delay with a duration of 3 seconds. And after the 3 seconds, this will set state and say that the isPressed is now equal to false. So what will happen is this will tell that the button has been pressed, will not be accessible until the 3 seconds has finished, and then the isPressed will be false, and the button will be available once again. But we still need to add the animated modal barrier, and for this, inside the stack widget, we will say if isPressed, then we will show the animated modal barrier widget that we have created at the beginning. Now if you reset the application and you press on the button, you will see an animated modal barrier going over the button for 3 seconds, and the button will not be clickable until the modal barrier has vanished. The animated opacity widget. You need to create a double opacity level that we will start by setting up at 1.0. Inside a center and a column widget, we will add the first widget, which is the animated opacity. This one will have the opacity of the opacity level that we have just created. The duration of the animation will be 2 seconds. The child will be a Flutter logo with the size 50. And under this widget, we will have the elevated button. The child is a text saying fade logo. And when we press on this, we will set state and we will say that if the opacity level is currently 0, then it will be 1, and otherwise it will be 0. And with all this, you can animate the opacity of the Flutter logo. You can see that it takes 2 seconds to vanish completely in the screen. The animated padding. First thing we need is a double padding value, which we call at 0 when we start. This one is just the value of the padding that will be used inside the animated padding widget. In the column with multiple widgets, we will have the first widget that is an elevated button. The style will be a color orange accent. The child will be a text change padding. And when we press on it, this will set state and change the value of the padding value. If the padding value is currently equal to 0, then it will be 100. Otherwise, it will be 0. This line of code will just alternate between 0 and 100 for the padding value. Under the elevated button, we will have a text saying padding is equal to the padding value. Under we have the animated padding that use the padding agentsets.all with the pad value variable. The duration is 2 seconds. We can add a curve animation. This one will be the is in out, but you can use any curve. The child is a container, and the width is the mediaQuery.ofContext.size.width, which is the width of the screen. The height will be the height of the screen divided by 4. The color is orange accent. And every time you press on the change padding, this will set the padding as 0 or 100. And you can see that the animation of the padding is done automatically by Flutter with the animated padding widget. The animated physical model. Step number 1 is to add a boolean isFlat set as true. Then inside the center and a column, we have multiple widgets. The first one is the animated physical model. And you can see that this requires the child, the color, the duration, and multiple other arguments. The first one we will add is the duration of 500 milliseconds. Then we will have a curve, fast out, slow in, but you can change the curve if you want. The elevation will be, if it's flat, then it will be 0, and otherwise it will be 6. The shape will be a box shape .rectangle, but you can put circle if you want. The shadow color will be a colors black. The color of the widget will be white. The child will be a sized box with the height and the width of 120. The child is a simple icon with the Android outlined icon. Under this widget, we will have a sized box with the height 20. And an elevated button with the child text click and an onPressed function that will trigger a set state and say that the isFlat boolean is equal to the reverse of the isFlat. So if it's true, then it will be false. If it's false, then it will be true. And with all this, you have created an animated physical model. You can see that every time I click on the button, this creates a shadow animation for the sized box. The animated positioned widget. We create a boolean selected set as false to start. Then inside a sized box, we will define the width and the height, which is 200 and 350. The child will be a stack widget with multiple widgets inside. The first one is the animated positioned. The width will be, if it's currently selected, then it's 200, otherwise it will be 50. And we will do the same thing for the height and the top. If it's selected, then it's a value. Otherwise, it's another value. The duration of the animation will be 2 seconds, the curve will be fast out, slow in, and the child will be a gesture detector. When we tap on it, this will set state and say that the selected is equal to the reverse of the selected. If it's currently true, then it will be false. And if it's false, then it will be true. The child of the gesture detector is a simple container with a box decoration, orange, and the border radius circular 25. And every time you press on the container, this will animate the width, the height, the top of the animated positioned. So the position of the widget will be animated. The animated rotation. The first thing we need is a double called turns, and we will set this one as 0. Next, inside a center column, we will add the widget padding with the edgeAndSets.all 50. The child will be the animated rotation. The turns argument will be the turns that we have declared earlier. The duration will be 1 second, and the child will be a Flutter logo with the size 100. Under the padding in the column, we will have an elevated button. This one will have a child text rotate logo, and the style will be colors.orange accent. Finally, we have the unpress, and when we click on it, this will trigger the set state and will say that the turns is equal to plus 1/4. With all this, when you press on the rotate logo button, this will rotate the Flutter logo 1/4, and you can do it multiple times. This is to create an animation for the rotation of any widget. The animated size widget. We start with a double size, which we set as 300. Then inside a gesture detector, we will have the untap, and this will trigger a set state, which will say that the size, if it's currently equal to 300, then now it will be 100, otherwise it will be 300. This will just alternate the size between 300 and 100. The child of the gesture detector will be a container. This container will be white. The child is the animated size widget. Inside we have a curve ease in, but you can use any curve. The duration will be 1 second, and the child will be a simple Flutter logo with the current size. And like this, you can animate the size of any widget. Every time you click the gesture detector, the size will alternate between 100 and 300. The animated switcher. We will create an int called count that we will start at 0. In a center and a column, we will have the first widget called the animated switcher. This one will have a duration of 500 milliseconds. The child will be a simple text with the value count inside, and the style will be the font size at 40. Under, we will have an elevated button. The child will be a text add, and when we press on it, this will set state and add the count +1. With this, when you press on the elevated button, you can see that nothing special happened. And this is because you will need to add the key inside the text widget. You can see that we have added the value key, and inside we have the count. And we need the key to track how the animated switcher will work. And you can see now that every time we press on the add button, there is a fade animation between each numbers. And if you want to have a different animation for the animated switcher, you can add the transition builder. This have the child in an animation. Inside you can return, by example, the scale transition. The scale will be the animation that we receive, and the child will be the child that we have. Like this, every time we press on the button, there is a scale transition instead of the fade animation. And this was the animated switcher widget, the app bar widget. Inside the scaffold, we have an argument app bar, and inside we can have the app bar widget. First, we will have a title, and this will create the app bar. You can also put the center title as true to put the title in the middle. And the argument action is to have multiple icons on the right side. In the list of widget, I will have an icon button with the icon notification. The background color can be set for orange accent, by example. You can also edit the leading icon. This one will be an icon button, and the icon will be menu. If you want to have rounded corner for the app bar, you can also have the shape, which we use the rounded rectangle border. Inside we have the border radius, circular 25 for the bottom left and the bottom right. And you can see that we have an app bar with Flutter. The aspect ratio widget. First, we will start with a container with the color orange accent. The alignment will be center, the width will be infinite, and the height will be 150. This is what we have. Inside the child of the container, we will have our aspect ratio. The aspect ratio argument will be 16:9. This is the same as television and computer ratio. Inside we will have the child container. The color will be blue-gray, and this is what we have. You can see that this is the size of a computer. Now let's change the height for 300, and you can see that you still have the aspect ratio 16:9. And this is only possible by using the aspect ratio widget. the autocomplete. First, we create a list of string, which we call the list items. This will just be a list of multiple fruits, apple, banana, melon. Inside the build, we will return the autocomplete, and inside we can say that this will be strings. The option builder will have inside the text editing value. This is what we enter inside the text. This is the input of the user. If the text editing value.text is equal to nothing, then we will return an empty list of iterable string. Otherwise, we will return the list of items under certain condition. For each item, this is what we will do. We will return the item if it contains the text editing value.text, which is the input of the user, dot to lowercase. In other words, if the user have written A, this will return the apple and the banana. You can also have an unselected. This means when the user click on a certain item. For now, we will just print the item was selected. And you can see that when I go inside the app and I write A, I will have the suggestion for apple because we have the A, and banana because we have a A. If I write P, this will only suggest me apple. And this was how to use the autocomplete. The backdrop filter. We start by adding the import Dart UI because you will need this to use the backdrop filter. Next, inside the stack widget, we will have a list of widgets. The first one will be a text saying 0, and this will be replicated 10,000 times. The style will be a text style with the color green. Under this widget, we will have a center. The child will be a clip rec, and in this one, we have the backdrop filter. We need to say image filter.blur. Give a sigma x and a sigma y. This is to know the direction of the blur. The child of the backdrop filter will be a container. The alignment will be center. The width and the height will be 250. And the child will be a text saying blur. In the background, you have the green text. And over you have the blur container that uses the backdrop filter, the banner widget. We will start by creating a little UI that will use the banner widget. This UI will be a container blue-gray with a padding. We will have a column with multiple widgets. The first one will be an image network. Under we have a sized box of height 10, a row that will have a text Flutter course, and an elevated button that will have a text get now. So this is our widget, and now we will use the banner widget. For this, we will go on the container and we will wrap the container with the clip rec. After, we will wrap again the container, but with the banner widget this time. You can add any message. This one will be 25% off, by example. The location will be the banner location, the top end, and the color will be red. And this is how you create a banner with Flutter. Keep in mind that you can put the banner location in any corners. Baseline widget. In the center, we will create a container that have the width and the height of 200. The color will be orange, and the child will be the baseline widget. For this, we will create the baseline argument at 0. We will create a text baseline alphabetics, and the child will be a Flutter logo. And you can see that even if the baseline is nested inside the container, you can see that the Flutter logo is over the baseline of the container. And if you change the baseline for 50, you will see that the Flutter logo is now inside the container. The block semantics. To see how this works, we will need to add under the material app the show semantic debugger through. By doing this, you will see that the application will look like this. After, what we will need to do is create a boolean isShow that we will set as false. Inside the UI, we will have a column. This column will have inside the outlined button. This will have a child text click and a function on press that will set state and say that the isShow is equal to true. And now you will see the button with the blue semantics. Under the outlined button, we will say if isShow is true, then we will show a card. This one will have the color orange, and the child will be a sized box with the width 200. The child will be a column, and inside this column we will have a text, this is a card, and a text button, and when we press on it, this will set state and trigger the isShow is now equal to false. If I click on the button, this will open the sized box with the text button inside. It's now time to use the block semantics. So we will find the card and we will wrap this with the block semantics. The argument blocking will either be true or false. Now you can see that if I press on the button, this will trigger the block semantic of the sized box and will hide the semantic of the outlined button. I will go back inside the Material app and remove the Show Semantics debugger. The application looks like this. You can click on the button and in real life you will still see the outlined button, but the semantics over it will not be accessible. Some people will use a voice assistant to explain what happened on the screen, and the semantics can be used to tell the user what is on the screen right now. So this widget can be very useful for people that use a voiceover to understand what happened on the screen. The bottom navigation bar. At the start, we will create a current index that we will set as 0. And we will create a list of widgets, which we will call body. This will be a list of multiple icons, the home, the menu, and the person. This will be used in the body of the scaffold. So let's do this right now. In the scaffold, we have the body. We will create a center widget. Inside we have the child, which is the body. We will show the icon of the current index. Now it's time to create the bottom navigation bar widget. This one will require the current index. We have created this variable earlier. When we press on an icon from the bottom navigation bar, this is what will happen. We will have the information of the new index, we will set state, and then we will say that the current index is equal to the new index that we have received from the untap. The items from the bottom navigation bar will be a list of bottom navigation bar item. You need to create a label. For this one, we will say home. We will create two other bottom navigation bar item, this one with the menu and this one with the profile. And with all this, you can see that you have a bottom navigation bar with Flutter, and every time you change the icon in the body will change also. The bottom sheet. In a center widget, we will create an elevated button. This one will have a text model bottom sheet, and when we press on it, this will trigger the show model bottom sheet. You will need the context inside and a builder. The builder will have also the context, and this will return a sized box by example, but it can be any widget. We will set the height at 400. Inside we will have a center widget with a child elevated button. This one will have the text close, and when we press on it, this will trigger the navigator.pop context. In other words, this one will be used to close the bottom sheet. And when you press on the model bottom sheet, you will see that the sheet is coming from the bottom inside your app, and you can also close it. And the animation is all done for you. The builder widget. Inside the body of the scaffold, we will create a custom widget. And this custom widget will return a text widget. Inside we will have the text with theme, and what we want is the style to be theme.ofContext, the text theme.display large. But you can see that we have a problem. We don't have access to the context. We could either pass the context inside my widget, but we could also use the builder widget. So we will wrap the text widget with the builder widget. And you can see that the builder use the builder argument. This will give us access to the context and will return our text widget. And now we have access to the context and we can see our text with the text theme display large. In other words, the builder will give you access to a new context. The card widget. Inside the center of the app, the child will be the card widget. You can change the elevation of the card and the color if you need. The child will be a padding. The padding will be all in set 15. And the child will be a column with the main axis size minimum. The list of children will be the sized box height 8. A text, this is a Flutter card. And a simple text button with the text pressed. And the orange thing is what we call the card. It's like the container widget, but you have an elevation and rounded corners. The center widget. Inside a column, we will create the main axis alignment.center. The children will be a simple container. The color will be orange accent, and the child will be a center widget with the text Flutter map. And you can see that the text is currently in the center of the orange container. But if you didn't know, you can add also an argument height factor inside the center, and this will multiply the current height of the widget by the number you have in the height factor. Keep in mind that this is only possible because we have a column widget. If the container had a defined height, this height factor will not work. the checkbox widget. First, we need to create a boolean isChecked set as false. In the center widget, we will have a child checkbox. This one will have the value isChecked, which is the boolean. You can also change the active color. We will say orange accent. And when you press on the checkbox, this will trigger the unchanged with a new value. And you just have to set state and say that isChecked is equal to the new boolean value. Like this, you have a checkbox widget. But you can also add the tree state as true, and this will allow the checkbox to have the null value. So this is checked, this is null, and this is unchecked. The checkbox list style. First thing we need is a boolean isChecked set as false. In the center widget, we will have the checkbox list style. You will need to have a title. This one will be a text checkbox list style. The value will be the isChecked from the boolean that we have created earlier. You will need the unchanged argument, and this will give you the new value of the checkbox. Inside you will say set state, and the isChecked will now be equal to the new value. You can change the active color. I will put orange accent. The check color will be white. And if you press on the button, you will see it's white and with the orange accent background. You have also the argument tile color, which will be black 12. A subtitle text, this is a subtitle. And if you want, you can switch the location of the checkbox by using the control affinity, liststyle control affinity .leading. The argument tree-state true will allow you to have the checked, null, or unchecked. This was the checkbox list style, the chip widget. Inside the center widget, we will have the chip widget. You can have the label, which we will use a text widget. This is a Flutter chip. And the undeleted function. For now, we will just debug print and say do something. And now you will have a chip widget with a delete button. Keep in mind that you can put anything that you want inside the undeleted function. The choice chip widget. The first thing we need is to create a boolean isSelected set as false. In the center widget, we will have a choice chip widget. This one will have a label text choice chip. The selected will be the isSelected boolean we have created. The selected color will be a color orange accent. The unselected will give us a new state, which is a new boolean, and say that isSelected is now equal to the new boolean. Like this, you have created a choice chip that can change color when you click on it. The circle avatar widget. In a center, we will create the circle avatar. Inside, we will have the background color, which we will say orange accent. You can have the radius 55 if you want to change the size. And I will add a background image, which is an asset image from my assets. And this will create a circle around your image. If you need, you can also have a child inside the circle avatar. This will be a text saying hi. And this is how to use the circle avatar with Flutter, the circular progress indicator. Inside the center widget, we will create a circular progress indicator, and this is what we have on the screen. But you can also change the color for orange accent, the background color for blue-gray, and if you want to define how many orange there is inside the circular progress indicator, you can use the value 50 by example, so half of the circular progress indicator will be orange. With this, you can create your own load animation, the clip oval widget. We will start with a center widget and have the clip oval inside. The child will be a simple container. The width and the height will be 80, and we will put the color as orange. With this, you can see that you have a circle instead of a square container. But you can also edit the shape of this circle by using a custom clipper. So you will use the clipper argument and create a custom clip. This one will be a class custom clip with the extend custom clipper rect. You will need to create an override getClip, and by example, you can return the rect.fromLeftTopWidthHeight. In this example, the width will be -15 and the height will be the same height. You will also need to override the shouldReclip, and for this one, we will return false. Because we remove 15 from the size of the width, this should, if we restart, create a shrink circle. This was the clip oval, the clip path widget. We will return in the build the clip path widget. The child will be a container, the width double.infinity, the height 300, and the color will be a dark blue. This is what you have on the screen right now. Now for the clip path, we will create a clipper. We will call this one myClipper. For this, you will need to create a class myClipper that extend the custom clipper path. You will need two overrides inside this one. The first one is the path getClip, and the second one is the should reclip that we will set as return false. And with this, you will have create a wave in the background of your application. If you want to know how to generate a custom getClip like this, you can click the video on the top corner of this one. I will explain you how to create custom getClip. The clip rect widget. In the center, I will create a container that have the width and the height of 3000. The color will be orange accent. And this will cover the entire screen. Next, we will wrap the container with the clip rect, and we will create a clipper myClipper. Let's create the class myClipper with the custom clipper. We need the first override getClip. This one will return the rect.fromLeftTopWidthHeight, and this is the value inside. We will also create the override shouldReclip that will return false. You can see that we have reshaped the container for the width and the height 80. If you want, you can also put the left at 50, and this will create a spacing of 50 on the left. The clip or rect widget. In the center widget, we will create a clip or rect. This one will have a border radius with the border radius.circular, and the child will be an image asset. This one will have the width of 350. You can use the clip or rect widget with the border radius to create rounded border for any widget. The close button widget. Inside the center, we will create the close button widget. You can change the color of the widget. We will use the color.red. And you have the function onPress. Inside you can put anything. We will just say debug print, do something. This widget have an icon X, and this is the purpose of the close button. Just like this, you have created the close button widget. Colored box. In your app, you can create a center widget. Inside we will have the colored box. The color will be orange accent, and the child will be a sized box with the width and the height of 100. And this will create a colored box. The color filtered. We will start by this widget, the color filtered. Inside you have the argument color filter, and you can put the color filter.mode, which have inside the colors.white, the blend mode.color, and the child of the color filtered will be an image asset, blue.png. And because we use the color white and the blend mode color, it will create this color filter effect over our image. You can change the color or the blend mode if you want. The constrained box. In a center widget, we will create the constrained box, and inside we will have the argument constraints. This will take a box constraints. The max width will be way bigger than the size of the screen, and the max height will be 350. In the child, we will have a container. This one will have the color orange accent, and the width double.infinity. You can see that even if the max width is over the size of the screen, by using the double.infinity, the container will take all the remaining place without giving any errors. And also the container will use the max height at 350. If you want, you can also have the min height and min width. The constrained box is used to constrain any widget inside. The container widget. This one is very common, but I will show you things that you don't know about the container. So you can see that we have the padding, the color, and the alignment. This is all the things that we already know. We also know that we can add a child. In this example, it will be a text widget. But did you know that you can add also constraints? For this, you will use the box constraints.expand. The height will be 200 by example. And you can see that the height and the width value include the padding. But there is another argument called the transform that you can use inside your container. For this, we'll use the matrix4.rotationz at 0.2. And you will see that this will transform the position of the container widget. The column widget. This one is very common, but I will try to give you more information about it. First thing first, we have the children. This one will be a list of widgets, so we will just create a couple of text widgets inside, and this is what you will see on the screen. But you can also change the alignment of the column. If you use the cross-axis alignment, and you say cross-axis alignment.end, this will align all the text widget to the end of the column. You can do the same thing for the main axis alignment. You use the main axis alignment.end, and all the widget will be at the end from the main axis, which is vertical. There is a third argument called the main axis size, and you can set this one as main axis size.minimum, and this will make sure that the column will take only the place that it needs. So if I save, all the widget will go back on the top, even though we use the main axis alignment.end. This is very useful when you don't want your column to take all the remaining place. The Cupertino app. In this example, we will try to create this application with the Cupertino app instead of the material app. So we will return the Cupertino app. Inside we have the mode banner to false. The theme will be the Cupertino theme data. So the brightness will be dark. The scaffold background color will be this color. The primary color will be system orange. And the home will be a text widget Flutter map. But you will see that this is not exactly the app that we want. For this, we will need to use the Cupertino page scaffold. And this is the next widget, the Cupertino page scaffold widget. The previous widget was the Cupertino app. Inside the Cupertino app and the home, we will remove the text Flutter map and we will create the Cupertino page scaffold instead. This one will need a child, which will be a center widget. The navigation bar will be the Cupertino navigation bar. The middle will be the text Flutter map. And in the center, we will have the child icon Cupertino icons.shares. And this is what we will have on the screen. You can see that the navigation bar is the same thing as the app bar inside the scaffold widget. This was how to use the Cupertino page scaffold with your Flutter app. The Cupertino action sheet action. This is what you will have in your application at the end of this code. So we will start with the Cupertino page scaffold that we have looked at in the previous widget. The child will be a center widget. Inside the center, we will have the Cupertino button. The child will be a text Cupertino action sheet. And when we press on it, this is what will trigger the Show Cupertino model pop-up. This one will need the context and the builder. The builder will be a context that will return the Cupertino action sheet. The title will be a text Flutter map. The message will be another text, your message. And inside we have the action, which is the Cupertino action sheet action. We have the first one. Inside you will need a child, which we will use a text do something, and an onPress function. We will just return a navigator.pop context. We will do the same thing for another Cupertino action sheet action. The child will be a text do something else, and the onPress will be also a navigator.pop. And with this, you have created a button that when you press on it, you have the two Cupertino action sheet action, the do something and the do something else. The Cupertino activity indicator. In the Cupertino page scaffold, because we are in the theme of Cupertino right now, we will have the widget center. In this one, we will create a Cupertino activity indicator. And you can see that this triggers a loading animation icon. But you can also change the radius for 50 or change the color for orange accent. And this is the Cupertino activity indicator. It's a loading animation, but for iOS. The Cupertino alert dialog. Inside the Cupertino page scaffold, we have the center, and inside this one, we have the Cupertino button, which is this one. And when we will press on it, this is what we will trigger right now. The Cupertino button will have the onPress function and the child text Cupertino alert dialog. Inside the onPress, we will use the Show Cupertino dialog. This one will have the context and a builder. The builder will need the context and will return the Cupertino alert dialog widget. This widget will have inside the title. This will be a text alert. The content will be a text, are you subscribed to Flutter map? And some actions that are the Cupertino dialog action. We will create the first one, the Cupertino dialog action, with the child text no. We will set the is destructive action to true, because this will make the button go red. And when we press on it, this will trigger the navigator.pop. We will do the same thing for another Cupertino dialog action. The child will be yes. When we press on it, this will trigger the navigator.pop. And you can see that we have created a Cupertino alert dialog. The Cupertino button. So we will have two different Cupertino buttons, this one and this one. In the center widget, we will create a column. The main axis size will be main axis size.minimum. And inside we have all the children. This will be the Cupertino button. The first one doesn't have borders. We will have inside the onPress function that will return nothing, and we have the child text enabled. Right under, we will create a sized box just to create some spacing between those two widgets. And under the sized box, we will create the Cupertino button.filled. This one will have the onPress with nothing inside, and the child will be enabled. And with this, you will have create two Cupertino button. But keep in mind that if you replace the onPress with null, this will automatically disable the buttons. This was the Cupertino button widget, the Cupertino context menu. And this is what we will create, a button that will trigger two different actions. Inside the center widget, we will create a sized box first with the width and the height 100. Inside we have the child Cupertino context menu. This one will take a child. In this case, it will be the image network, and it's the YouTube image. The actions will be a list of Cupertino context menu action. The child will be a text action 1, and the onPress will have the navigator.pop context. We will do the same thing with another Cupertino context menu action. The child will be a text action 2, and the onPress will be a navigator.pop. And with this, you have created an image button that when you press on it, you have two different options, the action 1 or the action 2. And this was the Cupertino context menu, the Cupertino date picker. We will create a button, and when we press on it, we will have access to a date picker. You can select the date, you can select the time also. So let's create this right now. The first thing you will need is a date time, and this is how date time works. We have the year, then we have the month, then we have the day, the hour, and the minute. Next, inside the center widget, we will use the Cupertino button. This one will have a text Cupertino date picker, and the onPress function will trigger the show Cupertino model pop-up. Inside we have the context and we have the builder. The builder will have inside the context and will return a sized box. The height of the sized box is 250. The child is a Cupertino date picker. And you will see it's very simple to set this up. I will start by putting a background color white. The initial date time will be the variable date time that we have created at the start. Then we have the argument onDateTimeChanged. This will give us a new time, which is the time that the user will select on the phone. And then we just need to set state, and we say that the date time is now equal to the new time. Then you can use this to know the time and the date selected. You can use the 24-hour format if you want, and you can change the mode to use only the time, by example. So if I click again, I will have only the time, or you can have only the date. I will try again, and you will see that this is only the date now. And if you want to display the date time on the screen, you can change the current text widget by something like this. And you will have the current selected date on the screen, the Cupertino page route. And this is how it will look. When we will press on this button, another page will come, but with the transition of iOS. And I will show you right now how to do this. The first thing you need is to create another class page2. This will be a stateless widget. And inside the build, we will return a simple scaffold, the background color blue-gray, the body center, and the child page2. Now on the first page, inside a center widget, we will create the Cupertino button.filled. This is the button. And inside we will have the text click for page2. The onPress function will trigger the navigator.off context, .push, and inside we will use the Cupertino page route. It's the same thing as the material page route, but for iOS. Inside you will need the builder, the context, and you will return the page2 that we have created earlier. And just like this, you have created a Cupertino page route for your Flutter app, the Cupertino page scaffold. And this is how it will look. So let's do this right now. First, we will return a Cupertino page scaffold, but make sure that you use the Cupertino app instead of the material app. Inside, we will have the child, which will be a stack widget. The background color will be a color from ARGB. The navigation bar will be the Cupertino navigation bar. Inside, we have the background color with opacity. The middle is the title, which will be Flutter map. And inside the stack widget, we will have only one children. It will be the image.network. The fit will be boxfit.cover, and the height will be double.infinity. And this is how it will look. The Cupertino page scaffold is the same thing as the scaffold widget, but for Cupertino, which means for iOS. The Cupertino picker. You will see that when you press on the button, you have a selection. You can select between 0, 1, or 2, and you will see the value on the screen change for the button. We will need to start with the int selected value equals 0. Then inside the center widget, we can create the Cupertino button.filled. This one will have a child text value is equal to the selected value, which is currently the number 2. For the onPress function, we will use the show Cupertino model pop-up. Inside we have the context and we have the builder. The builder will have a sized box, the width will be doubled at infinity, and the height 250. The child will be the Cupertino picker. This one will have a background color white, the item extend 30, this is the height of the current item inside the list. The scroll controller will be a fixed extend scroll controller. We will also need children and unselected item changed. This will give us a new value. Okay, so now for the scroll controller, inside this we will create the initial item at 0. And you can see that every time we open this will show us the value 1. Next, inside the children, we'll have 3 different text widgets, which will be 0, 1, and 2. And for the unselected item change, we will set state and say that the selected value is now equal to the new value. And just like this, you have created a Cupertino picker with Flutter. The Cupertino pop-up surface. And this is how it will look. You will click on a button and a pop-up surface will come up with the iOS style. For this, we will create a Cupertino page scaffold with a center inside. And we want to create this button. So we will say Cupertino button. Inside, we will have the text click me. And the onPress will trigger the Show Cupertino model pop-up. Inside, we have the context and the builder. The builder will return the Cupertino pop-up surface. The child will be a container. Inside, we have the Cupertino white color. The alignment will be center, the width will be doubled at infinity, and the height will be 400. And like this, you have created this pop-up. But now inside, we will create a child center with a Cupertino button. This one will have the text close, and when we press on it, this will trigger the navigator.pop. And just like this, you have created a Cupertino pop-up surface, the Cupertino scroll bar. And this is how it will look. We will have the Cupertino scroll bar on the side of the list view. So we will return the Cupertino scroll bar. Inside we have the child listview.builder. This one will have the item count at 50. So we will have 50 items. The item builder will have the context and the current index, and we will return a center widget with the text that will display the current index. The style will be font 30. And this is what you should see on the screen right now. But you can also change the visual of the scroll bar. You can change the thickness for 6, by example, or the thickness while dragging, the radius, and the radius while dragging. This is what we see when we scroll normally, and when we click on it to drag, this is another visual. And this was how to create a Cupertino scroll bar. The Cupertino search text field. And you will see that this one have a leading and trailing icon already nested inside the widget. For this one, we will start with the final text editing controller, which we will call text controller. This one will be a text editing controller with the text Flutter map. Inside the container, we will have a color Cupertino color system orange. The padding will be 10, and the child will be a center with the Cupertino search text field inside. And just like this, you have a search bar with the search icon. But we will also set the controller to the text controller that we have created. And now you will see that we have the text Flutter map inside, and if you click the X, this will automatically delete the text inside. And this was how to create the Cupertino search text field with Flutter. Number 63, the Cupertino segment control. You can see that we have 3 different buttons, and when we click on it, we have on the screen the text of the button. And this is what we call a Cupertino segmented control. The first thing we need is a nullable string called current text. And in the column, we will create a children. The first one will be a sized box height 50. The second one will be the Cupertino segmented control. For this, we need the children, which will be 3 different texts. The first one is the Flutter, which is a container. The second one is map, and the third one is YouTube. I will show you how to build this a little bit later. The unchanged value will return a string. With this one, we will set state and say that the current text is equal to the value. Under, we will create a sized box height 50, and if the current text is not equal null, then we will create a text widget with the current text. Otherwise, we will return an empty container. And this part is the text that you can see on the screen, YouTube. Now let's work on the containers of the Cupertino segmented control. For the first one, the container color will be if the current text is equal to Flutter, which is this text, then we will return the color orange accent 100, otherwise it will be white. The width will be doubled at infinity, the padding will be edgeAndSets.all 8th, and the child will be a simple text Flutter. So you can see that when I press on Flutter, the color will be orange accent 100. Now we will do the same thing for map and YouTube. So for map, we will say the color is equal to orange or white, depending on the current text. The width will be double infinity, padding 8, and text map. For YouTube, it's the same thing, the color, the width, the padding, and the child. And with this, you have created a Cupertino segmented control with Flutter, the Cupertino slider. And this is what you will have on the screen with this widget. We will start this by creating a double current value equal to 1. And inside the sized box, we will create a column widget with the children. The first one will be a sized box height 50. The second one is a text widget with the current value .toString, because we want to see the value on the screen. After, we have another sized box height 50, and we will use the Cupertino slider. This one will need a value, which will be the current value that we have created. The minimum value will be 0, the maximum value will be 10, the divisions will be also 10, and when we change the slider, we will have a new selected value. This is a double. We will set state and say that the current value is equal to the selected value. And this is the Cupertino slider with Flutter. Number 65, the Cupertino sliding segmented control. You will see that you have a selection of multiple items, and the segmented control will slide automatically with an animation. To create this, we will start with the int sliding equals 0. Inside the center widget, we will have the Cupertino sliding segmented control. The children will be 0, the text 0, 1 text 1, and 2 text 2. So the children is a map. Next, we need a group value, and this is the sliding int that we have created. Next, we have the unchanged value. This will return us a new int value, which we call the new value. We will set state and say that the sliding is equal to the new value. And just like this, you have access to a Cupertino sliding segmented control with your Flutter app. This one is pretty cool. The Cupertino switch. This will create a switch with the iOS theme. For this, we will start with the Boolean lights set as false. In the center, we will create a child Cupertino switch. This one will have the value light, which is a Boolean. The unchanged will return us a new value, and we will set state and say that the light is equal to the new value. But keep in mind that you can also use only the switch widget and say .adaptive, and Flutter will automatically give you the Cupertino switch if you are on an iOS device, and give you the normal switch if you are on an Android device. The Cupertino tab scaffold. With this, you will be able to create a navigation bar with iOS style. So we will return this widget, the Cupertino tab scaffold, and inside we will have the tab bar, which is a Cupertino tab bar. I will explain you this in the next widget. So for now, we will just fill it with the items without explanation. You will also need to have the tab builder. This one will have the context and the current index of the tab builder. This will return a Cupertino tab view. And again, this is a widget that I will explain you right after the Cupertino tab bar. So for now, we will just fill it with the builder. And you will see that with this, you have created a Cupertino tab scaffold widget with your Flutter app. The Cupertino tab bar. And you will see that this is the widget at the bottom of this application right now. So you will need to create first a Cupertino tab scaffold. Inside you will have your tab builder, which will return the Cupertino tab view. I will explain this one in the next widget, but you will also need to have the tab bar. And this is where we will use the Cupertino tab bar. This one will have the items inside, which will be a list of bottom navigation bar item. The first bottom navigation bar item will have the icon. We will use the Cupertino icons.home. The label will just be the text home. We will create another bottom navigation bar item. The icon will be the Cupertino icons.settings, and the label will be settings. And just like this, you have created a Cupertino tab bar with your Flutter app inside the Cupertino tab scaffold, the Cupertino tab view. And this is all the middle space of our application right now. So you will need to create a Cupertino tab scaffold first. Inside you will have the tab bar, which use the Cupertino tab bar. I already explained you this one in the previous widget. And now we will create a tab builder. This one will have the context and the current index. This will return the Cupertino tab view. For this one, you will need to have a builder. This one will have the context and will return anything that you want. For this example, we will return a center widget. The child will be an icon, and if the current index is equal to 0, then we will return the Cupertino icons.home. Otherwise, we will return the settings icon. But keep in mind that you can put anything inside the Cupertino tab view. And just like this, we have created a Cupertino tab view with Flutter. The Cupertino text field. First, we need to create a final text editing controller, call it the text editing controller, and we will set the initial text to Flutter map. Inside the Cupertino app, we will have the debug banner to false. The home will be the Cupertino page scaffold with a background orange. The child will be a padding edgeandsets.all 10, and inside the child center, we have the Cupertino text field. You can now put your text controller inside the controller, and you will have access to a Cupertino text field, the custom paint widget. And by using the custom paint, we can create something like this. This is like Pac-Man with a text over it. So inside a center widget, I will use the custom paint. This one will need the child, which will be a text widget, and a painter. We will need to create the demo painter for this. The text will be just, this is Pac-Man, with a text style inside. The color will be black, the background color white, and the font size 30. But now it's time to create the demo painter. And for this, you will need to create a class that extend the custom painter. And you see that you have an error, and this is because you need to overwrite the void paint and the boolean should repaint. For this one, we'll just return false, but you can return true if you want. For the void paint that we have inside the canvas and the size, what we will do is we will create a variable center with the size divided by 2. We will create a paint. This one will be the paint color equal to yellow, the color of the Pac-Man. And for the canvas, we will say draw an arc. Inside this one, we have the rect, double boolean paint. So for the rect, we will say rect.fromCenter. Inside we have the center, the width, and the height. For the starting goal, it will be 0.4, and the whip angle will be this. We will say the use center equal true, and at the end we will put the paint that we have created with the variable. And just like this, you have used the custom paint widget with your Flutter app. The custom scroll view widget. At the end of this video, you will be able to create something just like this. Let's start right now by using the custom scroll view widget. Inside we will use the sliver, which is a list of widgets. The first one will be the sliver grid. Inside you will have the delegate sliver child builder delegate and a function that uses the context and the index. The function will return a container. Inside we will have the alignment center and the color will be orange with some variation depending of the index. Next you will have a child which will be a text grid item with the index. After this you will need to create a child count. We will use 50. The next one is the grid delegate. For this, you can use a constant sliver grid delegate with max axis cross axis extend. We will use the max cross axis extend at 200. The main axis spacing to 10, the cross axis spacing 10, and the child aspect ratio to 4. And just like this, you have created a list of widgets with the custom scroll view widget. The data table widget. And this is what you will have on the screen after this explanation. So the first thing we will create is a title text style with the italic and the bold style. The return will be a data table widget, and inside we have the columns and the rows. For the columns, we will have 3 data columns widget. The first one is the name, the second one is the age, and the third one is the color. You can see that this is the titles of the table. Next, inside the rows, you will need to create 3 data rows widget. And inside each data row, you will need to create 3 data cell widget. And this is because you have 3 titles, the name, the age, and the color. So we have the name, the age, and the color. This was how to use the data table with your Flutter app. The data column widget. This widget can be used inside a data table widget under the arguments columns. And inside this one, you will need to put a list of data column widget. In this example, we have 2 data column widget. This means inside our data rows, we need to have 2 data cells. But if we add another data column, by example, the color data table, we will have an error on the screen. Because if we want to do something like this, we need to add also the data cells inside the data row. And now if I add the color red, the color blue, and the color yellow, now we can see that we have a third column with the data column widget. The data cell widget. For this example, we currently use the data table widget with the column and the rows. Inside the rows, we have the data row widget, and this one have a list of data cell. So by example, if you want to add another row inside this data table widget, you can add inside the list another data row. This one will have the cells, which contain multiple data cell widget. And now you can see that we have another row inside the table. But just make sure that you have the same amount of data cell compared to the number of title inside the columns. the data row widget. For this example, we have a data table widget that have the columns and the rows. This one will have a list of data row widget. And this widget will need inside the cells, which is a list of data cell. So we will add 3 different data cell, the name, the age, and the color. And now you can see that we have another row inside the table. But keep in mind that you can add as many data row that you want inside your data table. And this is how to use the data row widget inside your Flutter app, the time picker with Flutter. And I will show you how to create something like this. You will be able to select any current time, and this will be displayed on the screen. To create something like this, you will need to start with a time of day, which we will call selected time. This one will be a time of day.now, and inside the code, we will have a center, a column, and inside the children of the column, we will start with a text widget. This one will display the selected time.hours and the selected time.minutes. And this is what you see on the screen right now. Under this one, we will have the elevated button. The child will be a text choose time. And when we press on it, this will be an async function. We will have the final time of day, which is nullable, is equal to await show time picker. Inside this one, you will need the context, the initial time, which is the selected time we have created. You can also create the initial entry mode. For this example, I will use time picker entry mode dial. And after this, you will say if the time of the day is not null, then we will set state and say that the selected time is equal to the time of the day that we have received from the show time picker. And just like this, you have created a time picker with your Flutter app, the date picker with Flutter. And you will see that when you click on this button, you have access to a calendar and you can select any date to have it on the screen right after. And I will show you how to create this right now. The first thing you will need is the date time selected date. This one is a datetime.now, and inside the center widget and a column, we will have the list of widget. The first one will be a text widget. Inside we will have the selected date.year, .month, and .day. Right under we will create an elevated button. The child will be a text choose date, and the onPress function will be async. Inside we have the final date time nullable called datetime. This one will await the show date picker. Inside this one we need the context, the initial date, which is the selected date we created. The first date, I will say datetime.2000. The last date, I will say datetime.3000. And right after you will say if the date time is not null, then we will set state and say that the selected date is equal to the new date time. And just like this, you have created a calendar with your Flutter app and you can select any date, the date range picker with Flutter. This will allow you to select a range of date in your Flutter app. I will save and you will see that by example, we have 17 days between those two dates. So let's code this right now. First thing, we will need to create a date time range, and this one will need to have the start, which will be datetime.now, and the end, datetime.now also. With this one, we can go inside the center and the column widget and create a text widget that use the text selected date.duration.inDays. This will allow us to know how many days there is between those two dates. And if I restart the application, you can see that we have 0 days because the end and the start is the same time. Under the text widget, we will create an elevated button. This one will have the child text choose dates. The onPress function will be async, and inside we have the date time range is equal to await show date range picker. Inside we have the context, the first date which will be 2000, the last date which is 3000, and after we need to say if the date time range is not null, then we set state and the selected date is equal to the new date time range. With this you have a way to select a range of date inside your Flutter app. The decorated box widget. If you look at the application, you will see that we have a gradient inside the background, orange into red. And this is what we will do right now with the decorated box widget. So inside a sized box, we will say that the height and the width is double.infinity. Inside this one, we will use the decorated box. We will need to add the decoration argument with the box decoration. Inside this one, I will use the gradient. But if you go over box decoration, you can see that you can change multiple different things. For this example, we will just touch on the gradient. And we will use the radial gradient for this one. Inside, we need the colors. And we will give the color deep orange and red. With this, we have used the decorated box widget to create a gradient inside our background application. Keep in mind that the decorated box can do more than just the gradient. The decorated box transition. You can see on the screen what we will create with this widget. It is an animation, and let's do this right now. First thing first, we will need to say with thicker provider state mixin, and I will tell you why we need this later. Next, we will need to create a decoration tween. This one will be equal to a decoration tween. Inside we have the begin and the end. You can see on the screen that we have two different box decoration. One is with the rounded border with the shadow, and the other one is nothing. So we will create this with those two box decoration. The first one will have the color white, the border will be border style.none, and the border radius is circular 60. Inside we have the box shadow. This one will be a box shadow with the color black 26, the blur radius, spread radius, and offset. So this first one is this animation right now with the shadow. And now we will create the other one that have nothing. So the end animation will be a box decoration, the color white, the border will be border style.none, and the border radius will be 0. Okay, so we have created our two box decoration. Now it's time to create an animation controller. This animation controller will have the VSync this, and you will have access to this only if you have the with thicker provider state mixin. Next, we need to have the duration. We will say 3 seconds, and we will also say that this will repeat with the reverse true. This means the animation will never stop. When we use controller, we always need to dispose the controller, so we create an override dispose controller.dispose. All the setup is completed. Now it's time to create inside a center widget the decorated box transition. The decoration will be the decoration tween that we have created at the start. You can see it is this final decoration tween. And then you will say .animate, and inside you will put the controller. We have also created this one. You will also need to create a child container. This one will be the width and the height 250, the padding, and the child will be the Flutter logo. And just like this, you have created a decorated box transition with Flutter. And as the name said, this will transition for two different box decoration. The default textile widget. Inside a column, we will have a list of children. The first one will be the text widget Flutter map. And this is the one that is on the top and white. Next, under this one, we'll create a default textile. And this will create a default textile for each text inside this widget. For this, we will need to create a style textile. The font size will be 36 and the color will be blue. This widget will also take a child, which will be a center widget. Inside we have a column, and in the list of column, we will create a text widget Flutter map. And you can see that this one have the textile of the default textile widget. But keep in mind that you can add other text and you can change the style, by example saying textile font size 24, and this will change the font size of the text but will keep the color of the default textile. And you can do the same thing, by example changing the color only. So in this case the text size will be the same but the color will change. And this was the default textile widget, the dismissible widget. Let's say you have a list of items and you want to remove items inside the list. This is the dismissible widget. And I will show you how to use it right now. First thing first, we will need to create a list of int, which we call items. To generate this one, we will say list.generate 100 items, and each item will give us an index that we will store inside the list. In other words, this is a list of 100 numbers. In the return, we will say listview.builder because we want to create this list. Then you will need to say item counts, items.length. The padding will be vertical 16, and the item builder will return the dismissible widget. You can design the background of the dismissible widget. In this example, I will just use a red container. Inside we have the icon delete. And you can see that when I scroll, I have the icon delete with the red color behind. This is the background. Next, we need to have the key. And for this one, I will use the value key int. And inside I will put the index of the item. So the key will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. This will be important because we want to keep track of items that we delete. After we have the undemist widget. This will give you a demist direction, so you can decide which action will be triggered if the user go from the left or from the right. But for this example, I will just set state and remove the item from the current index. The child of the dismissible will be a list style, the title will be a text with the current item. And with this code, you have created a list of dismissible items. The divider widget. It can be used to divide between two different widgets. And for this one, we will create a column widget. Inside, we will have two containers. Both will have a height of 200, a width of double infinity, and the color orange. Right now, there is no space between those two widgets. But if you use the divider widget, you will see that you have a line between those two. You can also change the color of the divider, the height of the divider, the thickness of the divider, the indent from the start, and the indent at the end. This was the divider widget. The draggable scrollable widget. As the name said, you will have a draggable list of scrollable items. For this one, you will need a draggable scrollable sheet. Inside, you will have the builder, which have the build context and the scroll controller. The return will be a container with the color orange. The child will be a simple listView.builder. Inside, we will put the scroll controller that we receive from the draggable scrollable sheet. The item count will be 25. The item builder will have the context and the index, which will return a list style of each items. And just like this, you have created a draggable and scrollable sheet. The drag target widget. And this is how it will look. You will be able to take a draggable widget and put it inside the drag target widget. To create something like this, we need to start with a variable color, which will be red. In a sized box with double infinity, we will have a column, and in the column, we will have a draggable widget. This one will have the data color orange accent, and the child will be a container with 100, 100 with the color orange. We need also to create an undraggable canceled and also a feedback. This one will be also a container with the color orange accent with opacity 0.5. And this one is the widget when we drag over the screen. Now that we have a draggable widget, we can create the drag target. Inside, you will need to have the onAccept argument. This will be the data that you receive from the draggable widget, and inside this function we will call the color is now equal to the color. We need also to create a builder. For this one we will have the build context, the list accepted, and the list reject. We will return a container. This one will have a width 200 by the height 200. The color will be if the accepted list is empty, then it will be the color, otherwise it will be the color gray shade 200. The child will be a center widget with the text drag here. And you can see that the drag target is currently the color. And as soon as we take the draggable widget and put it over the drag target, it is the gray color shade 200. And as soon as we release the widget, the color is now colors. This was the drag target widget. The draggable widget. It's a widget that you can take and drag anywhere on the screen. For this example, we will create a color red, and inside a sized box, we will create a column with multiple widgets. We will use a drag target widget, so we will be able to take the draggable and put it inside. This one have the argument unaccepted, have a builder, and return a container 200 by 200 with the text drag here inside. For the draggable widget, we will put it over the drag target, and you will have the data argument. This one can be any object, but for this example, we will use the color orange accent. This is the information that will be used later in the drag target widget. We need also to create a child. This will be a container 100 by 100, color orange accent, and the text box. You can see it's this widget. You can add also an undraggable canceled. This will be triggered when you take the widget and don't complete the action. The feedback will be a container with the width and height of 150. The color will be orange accent with opacity 0.5. The child is a center widget with the text box and 3 dots. This is the widget that you are currently dragging. You will also need to create a style for the text. I will use a color white and the font size 18. And just like this, you have created a draggable widget that you can put inside the drag target widget. The drawer widget. You can click on this button and this will open what we call a drawer, which you have 2 elements inside. To create something like this with Flutter, you will need inside your scaffold to use the argument drawer. Inside the widget, you will have a child. We will use a list view and we will have two list style inside. Just like this, you will have a button to open a drawer. But how can you create a button in the middle of the screen to open this drawer? For this, we will create in the body a center widget with the elevated button. Then we will wrap the elevated button with a builder widget. And inside the onPress, we will have the scaffold.ofContext.open drawer. And just like this, you can open the drawer from a button. If you want, you can change the location of the drawer by using instead the end drawer. And now you will see it will open on the right side. And if you want the button to work, you will need to use the open end drawer. Just like this, you have created a drawer within your Flutter application. The drawer header widget. First, we will need to create inside the scaffold a drawer. This one will have a list view and the children will be two list style. You can see that this will create a drawer on the screen. But you can add the drawer header inside this one. You can add a decoration. I will use the color blue, and then a child. The text is drawer header. And you can see that now we have a drawer header. The drop-down menu button. This will create a list of selectable items. And keep in mind that you can put this list inside your app bar on the top right corner. To create something like this, we will need first a variable drop-down value that we will set as 1. Inside the center of the application, we will create a drop-down button. The value will be the drop-down value that we just created. You can change the icon of this drop-down button. I will use the icon menu. The style of the text will be color white. You can also change the underline. This is the white bar under the drop-down button. The unchanged function will receive a new value. And with this, you can set state and set the drop-down value to the new value that you received. The last thing you need is the items inside your list. We will use 3 different drop-down menu items. The value will be 1 and the child will be 1 also. But for the second one, it will be 2, and the third one, it will be 3. Now, just like this, you have created a drop-down button within your Flutter app. The elevated button widget. This is 3 different forms of this elevated button widget, and I will show you how to create them. Inside the column widget, we will create the first elevated button with the onPress null. This will automatically create a disabled widget. Under this one, we will create a sized box height 30, and another elevated button. This one will have an empty function. And now you can see that the button is enabled. For the third one, first we will separate with a sized box height 30, and then we will create an elevated button.icon. This one will have an onPress function, a label text enabled, and the icon will be the icon message. This will create an elevated button with an icon inside. Flutter error details. When you use a try catch inside your Flutter app, you will see that you can catch an error and then debug print this error. But this is kind of bad. You could use instead the Flutter error details. For this, you will need a Flutter error.report error. Inside, you will have the Flutter error details. The exception will be the error that you catched. The library will be a custom message 1. And the context will be the error summary with the custom message 2. Now, when you catch the error, this is what you will have on the terminal. You have the exception cut by the custom message 1, and then you have the following message by the custom message 2, following by your errors. And I think this is better than the debug print. The error widget. When I click on this button, this will throw the red screen error. But what you can do is use instead the error widget.builder just after the main. This will give you the Flutter error details, and inside I will return a simple container. The alignment will be centered, the child will be a text widget with the error message. I will also create a custom style with the color orange, and the text align.centered. Now when I click on throw the error, this is what I will see on the screen. But if you want to see the red screen only when you use the debug mode, then you can create a boolean in debug is equal to false. You can use the assert function, which will be triggered only when you are in debug mode. And then you set the in debug to true. After you create a if condition, if it's in debug, then return the error widget detail exception. In this way, because I run the application in debug mode right now, if I click on throw error, this will still put the red screen. But in production, you will have the custom message error. The expanded widget. And this is how it will look if you have 3 widgets like this with different flex value. For this one inside the column widget, we will create the expanded widget. The flex will be 2 and the child will be a container blue. Under we create another expanded with the flex 1 and the color orange. The last one will have a flex 3 and have the color red. And you can see that even if the container have a certain height value, the expanded widget will take all the remaining place. And you can use the flex value to know which expanded will take more place than the others. In this case, this expanded widget will take 3 times the space of this expanded widget. The expand icon widget. It's an icon that will display either if it's expanded or not. And to use this one, we will first create a variable isExpanded, which we will set as false. First, we will create a container with the color orange and a row inside. In the list of widget, we will create a container with the title. Then we will use the expand icon widget. We will define the isExpanded with the variable we created at the start. The color will be white and the expanded color will be black. When we press on it, we will receive if it's currently expanded or not. And with this, we can set state and say that the isExpanded variable is now equal to the invert of the isExpanded. But now we need to display something right under. So inside our column, we will create a if it's expanded, then we will create a text Flutter map. And now you can see we can press on the expanded icon to see more information. The expansion panel list. First, we will create a class item. This one will have 3 arguments inside. The header text, the expanded text, and the isExpanded. With this, we can now create a list of the item class called data. This one will be a list.generate of 10 items that will return the item class. We have the header text and the expanded text. Now inside a single child scroll view, we will create the expansion panel list. For the expansion callback, this one will return the current index and with the boolean isExpanded or not. We can now set state and say that the data that we have created, which is the list of generate items, following by the current index of each element, that isExpanded, is equal to the invert of the isExpanded. In very simple words, if this expansion panel is not expanded and we click on it, this one will set state and set the expansion panel as expanded. The children will be a data.map.expansion panel because each element of this expansion panel list is an expansion panel. And we convert this into a list. Inside the bracket, we will return the expansion panel. This one take a header builder, which will be a list style, and take a body, which is also a list style. You can see that on the onTap function, we create a set state that will remove the data of the current item. In this way, if we click on this trash icon, this will remove the expansion panel from the expansion panel list. The expansion panel. This is what we consider an expansion panel, which is inside an expansion panel list. And for this example, we will need to create a class item with the argument header text, expanded text, and isExpanded. The header text is this information, the expanded text is the information inside the expanded, and the isExpanded is to know if this is open or not. The next step is to create a final list of item called data. This one will be a list of item.generate. We will generate 10 items inside this list, and each of them will return the item. Inside we have the header text and the expanded text. Now inside the single child scroll view, we will use the expansion panel list. The callback of this one will return the index and the isExpanded or not. Now we can set state and we can define the value of the data index.isExpanded to the invert of the isExpanded. With this we can create a children of the data.map of the expansion panel. This one will return us each item, which we will convert into a list at the end. The return will be our widget expansion panel. And this one take a header builder, which have the context and the isExpanded or not. Inside we return a list style with a title of the item.header text. This is the information panel 3 or panel 7. Next, we create a body for this expansion panel. This one will also be a list style. The title will be a text item.expandText. and this is the information inside the expansion panel. You can also add a subtitle and a trailing for this list style item. For this example, when we tap on the icon, this will set state and will go inside the data and remove the item where the current item is equal to the item. Finally, for the expansion panel, we have the isExpanded, which will be called from the item.isExpanded. If we restart the application, you will see that we have 10 items inside the expansion panel list, and each of them are an expansion panel. When you click on the trash icon, this will remove the expansion panel from the expansion panel list. The expansion tile widget. And this is what you will have at the end. To do something like this, we will first create a Boolean custom icon set as false. Inside a column widget, we will create the expansion tile. The title will be a text expansion tile, and you can also change the trailing icon if you want. For this example, we will say if the custom icon is true, then display this one, otherwise display the other icon. Later, we will find a way to set state the custom icon to a new value. Inside the children, you can add anything you want, but we will create a list style widget. The title will be a random text. On the expansion change, we will receive a new Boolean value. We will use this one to set state and set the custom icon to the value expanded that we just received. And with this, you can see that the icon is now different when we click on the expansion. But if you don't want to use a custom icon, you can remove the trailing and it will still work with the basic icon. The last thing I want to show you is you can use the control affinity.leading in order to change the location of this icon. And this was how to create an expansion tile with Flutter. The fade in image widget. When your image will load inside your Flutter app, this will display a placeholder before your image is loaded from the internet. You can see that we have a placeholder until the image is loaded. And to create something like this, it's pretty simple with Flutter. We will start with a center widget. We will create a child fade in image. This one will be .asset and network because the placeholder image is from the asset library and the final image is coming from a network. The argument placeholder is from the asset library.icon.ocean.gpg. This is inside the asset of my Flutter project. Now for the final image, this is coming from the internet and it's the image that you can see on the screen. So now when we restart the application, you will see that the placeholder image will be displayed before the network image is actually loaded. And this was the fade in image widget. The fade transition widget. This is what you will have at the end, the Flutter logo, fade in and fade out forever. And to create something like this, we will start with an animation controller called controller. This one will have a duration of 2 seconds and we will need to put the vsync this. And to have access, we will need to create the with ticker provider state mixin. After, we will repeat this information with the reverse through. This means it will fade in and fade out forever. With this controller, we can now create an animation. This one will be a curved animation. The parent will be the controller we just created. The curve will be curved ease in, but you can put any curve you want. After, we will create a dispose method and we will say controller.dispose. In the center widget of the app, we will create a fade transition widget. This one will have the opacity, which will be the animation we created, and the child will be a Flutter logo with size 300. And with all this, you will have a Flutter logo that will fade in and fade out forever. This was the fade transition widget. The filter chip widget. This is how it will look at the end. And to create something like this, we will start with the Boolean isSelected set as false. In the center of the application, we will use the widget filter chip. This one will have the label text filter chip, and the selected argument will be the isSelected Boolean. The unselected will return a Boolean value, so we will set state and we will say that isSelected is now equal to the invert of isSelected. But if you want, you can also use the value returned from the unselected. And this will create a filter chip in your Flutter app. But you can also add an avatar, and now the check mark will be over this avatar. This was the filter chip with Flutter. The fitted box widget. Whatever the size of this orange container, the text will always fit inside perfectly. And this is because we use the fitted box widget. For this example, we will create a container with height 25 with 100 color orange accent, and the child will be a text widget. This is a pretty long text. We will also create a style of color black. And without the fitted box widget, this is what we will see on the screen. But if you wrap the text widget with the fitted box widget, you will see that the text will perfectly fit inside the container. And now let's try to remove the height and change the width for 300. This is what you will have on the screen. You can see that whatever the size of the container, the text will always be perfectly fit inside. And this is because we use the fitted box widget. The flexible widget. In this example, we will create 3 flexible widgets inside a column. And you can see that the flexible widget is doing absolutely nothing if the inner widget have a certain height. But now if we remove every height of each container, you will see that the flexible will be used. And we define how many space each flexible take by using the flex argument. 5 is bigger than 3, so the flexible 5 will be bigger than this one. And if you want, you can convert a flexible widget into an expanded widget. First, let's re-add every height of each of them. Next, I will add the argument fit, flex fit, for each flexible widget. And now you will see this is acting as an expanded widget. The expanded widget will always take as much place as possible, even if the inner widget have a certain height. And now I will show you visually what is the difference between the expanded and the flexible. I've just replaced everything with 3 different rows. The first one have an expanded and a flexible, and you can see how the application is displaying both of them. If you have 2 expanded, this is how it will look, and if you have 2 flexible, this is how it will look. I hope this example helped you to understand what is the difference between the expanded and the flexible widget. Floating action button widget. In this one, I will show you how to create a button like this, but did you know that this button can be anywhere inside your application? And to build something like this, you will need to go inside your scaffold widget and create a floating action button inside the floating action button argument. You have the onPress function. For this example, we will have an empty function. The background color is the color of the button. We will use the orange accent. The child is the icon.add. And just like this, you have created a floating action button. But if you want, you can change the floating action button location by using the floating action button location.center.docked. Now it will be in the center. But you can use many other locations like the center float, center top, or end docked. At this point, it all depends on your preferences. This was how to create a floating action button with Flutter. The flow widget. You can use this widget to create a menu just like this one. To make this happen, we will start by creating inside the build the flow widget. And for this to work, we will need to create multiple things. First, we will add the with single ticker provider state mixin, and we will create a late animation controller menu animation. This example came from the Flutter website. After, we will create an icon dada. Last icon clicked is the icon notification. You can see that when I click on the menu, the notification item is the last one selected. If I select the home and I reopen the menu, the home will be selected. This is the reason of this variable. Next, we will create a list of menu items. This is all the icons available in our menu. After, inside the init state, we will create a menu animation. This one is an animation controller. The duration will be 250 milliseconds, and the vsync this came from the with single ticker provider state mixin. Otherwise, it will not work. After this, inside the flow widget, we can create the delegate, which will be a flow menu delegate. Inside, we will pass the menu animation that we just created. Let's create a delegate for the flow menu. We create a class flow menu delegate, which extends the flow delegate. Inside, we will pass the argument menu animation, and we need 2 different overrides, the should repaint and the paint children. This one will be the logic, how your animation will be displayed. After this, inside the flow widget, you can add the children. This one will come from the menu item, which is all the icons. And then you will use .map and .list to convert this into a list of widget. Inside, you will put a padding. This one will be an edge-set 5. The child will be a floating action button. You can see that each icon is a floating action button. The background color will depend if it's the last icon clicked or not. The splash color will be orange accent. Inside the onPress function, we will say if the icon is not the icon menu, then we will set state and say that the last icon click is equal to the icon, because we don't want the menu icon to be orange, only the icons that are inside the list. You will also verify that if the menu animation.status is equal to the animation status.completed, then we will revert the animation, otherwise we will forward the animation. And this is what triggered both animation, forward and reverse. The child of the floating action button will be an icon coming from the list of icons. And with all this, you will have create a flow widget. The Flutter logo widget. Did you know that you can add the text Flutter under the Flutter logo widget? And for this, you will have to use a center widget, use the Flutter logo. Inside you have the size, which we will use at 300. You can change the style of the Flutter logo to use the Flutter logo style.stacked, and this will put the text right under. But you can also change the color by using the text color blue, and this will add the word Flutter under the Flutter logo. This was the Flutter logo widget. The form widget. This widget will allow you to create a form within your Flutter app and validate everything with only one button. And to create something like this, we will need to start by creating a global key, which we will call the form key. Then inside a padding widget, we will create a form. The key will be the form key we just created. And inside the child, we will create a column widget. This one will have children, and the first one will be a text form field widget. Inside you can use the validator argument. It will return you the value, which is all the information entered inside the text field. And then you can create conditions. By example, if the value is null and empty, then we will return enter something. Otherwise, we will return null. We will create another text form field just like this one. And right under, we will create the elevated button. When we press on it, if the form key.currentstate.validate is true, then we will trigger the scaffold messenger show snack bar. In other words, this will trigger the validator of every text form field inside the form. And if the conditions are true, then it will trigger the snack bar. The child of the elevated button is a text validate. And now you can see that if we have text inside both text fields and we click the validate button, we will see the snack bar. And otherwise, it will show us the error message. And this is how to use the form widget with Flutter. The fractional translation widget. As you can see on the screen, we have 3 containers. But the orange and the red one is not the actual location where they came from. Because we use the fractional translation, we are able to move widget to different locations. Let me show you by using an example. We will use a column widget. Inside we have the children container with the color blue-gray, and this is how it looks like. Now we will use a fractional translation widget. Inside we will use the translation to offset 1 minus 1, and the child will be a container orange accent. You can see that even though we use a column widget, the widget is actually on the side of the first one. And this is because we use the translation. We move the widget 1 on the side and then minus 1, which will go on the top. We can use another example by using another fractional translation. This one will have the same offset and the child will be a container red accent. But this time the widget is under the orange container. This is because the third widget is actually located in this location. So when we move 1 and minus 1, this is the final location of the widget. And this is how you can use the fractional translation widget with your Flutter app. The fractionally sized box widget. This widget is exactly the half of the height of the screen and the half of the width of the screen. And this is because we use the fractionally sized box. Let me show you how it works. First, inside the center widget, you will use the fractionally sized box. The width factor will be 0.5 and the height factor will be 0.5. Inside you can put a child container with the color amber accent. And now you have this container. But if you change the height factor to 1, you will see this will take the entire height of the screen. And this was how to use the fractionally sized box with Flutter. The Future Builder widget. When I press on this button, this will wait until we have the data, and then it will display everything on the screen. So how do we use the Future Builder? The first thing we will create is a future get data. This will be an async function. Inside you will await a future delay for 1 second. This just means we will wait for 1 second. Then we will return the data. super. We will use this throw error later. Now inside the center widget, we will create the future builder. Inside we will have the future, which is the get data. The builder will have the context and the snapshot. Inside you can say if the snapshot.connectionState is equal to connectionState.waiting. So if we are waiting for the data, then it will return the circular progress indicator. And then we create another if-else condition. If the snapshot has an error, then we will return something, and otherwise we will return something else. So if we have an error, we will display a text widget with the snapshot.error.toString. And otherwise, we'll return a column widget with a text that have the snapshot.data.toString. We will also use an elevated button, and this one will have a set state inside the onPress function. The child will be a text refresh. Okay, so with all this, when we press the refresh button, this will trigger the function getData. We'll wait for once again, and then we'll return the data super. But what will happen if we throw an error? In this case, it will return the error widget. And this was how to use the future builder with your Flutter app. The gesture detector widget. In this example, we have a simple container that we have wrapped with a gesture detector. So every time we click on the container, this will trigger a function. But you can wrap anything with the gesture detector in order to create a button. To make something like this, you will first create an int counter, which will be 0. Inside the center widget, we will use a gesture detector. The onTap function will trigger a set state and will add 1 to the counter. The child will be a container with the height and width 200 and the color orange accent. The child will be a center with the text counter.toString, and we will add a style of font size 50. And this was how to use the gesture detector with Flutter. The grid paper widget. And this is how it looked like. To create something like this, you will start by creating a sized box with the height double.infinity, the width double.infinity, and the child will be the grid paper widget. Inside you can change the color for pink, the division for 1, the interval for 210, and the subdivision for 6. You can change all of this to create your own unique grid paper widget. The grid tile widget. You can see that we have a widget with a header and a footer. And this is created by the grid tile widget. To make something like this, you will use a sized box inside a center widget. You will create your own height and width. The child will be the grid tile. And inside you can have a header, which will use a simple container with the height 40. The child will be a center widget with the text header, and the color will be black 38. After you can create a child widget. In this example, we will just use an image from network. And this is how it will look. But you can also create a footer widget. For this example, we will use the same height. The child will be a center with the text footer, and the color will be also black 38. And now you can see on your screen, you have created a grid tile widget, the grid tile bar widget. On the screen right now, we use the grid tile widget, but inside we use what we call the grid tile bar. Let me show you right now by creating a center and a sized box widget with height and width. Inside the child, we will have the grid tile. The header will be a grid tile bar. You can change the background color. The leading will be an icon person. The title will be text Flutter map. And the trailing will be an icon menu. For the grid tile to work, we'll need to create a child. This one will just be an image network. And this is what we have on the screen right now. You can also use the grid tile bar inside the footer. For this example, we use the background color and the leading. So if you want to use the grid tile inside your Flutter app, you can use the grid tile bar inside the header and the footer. This was how to use the grid tile bar widget. The grid view widget. At the end of this video, you will be able to create a list just like this one. So first, we will use the gridView.builder. Inside, we have the grid delegate. For this one, we use the sliver grid delegate with fixed cross-axis count. The cross-axis count will be 2 because we want to have 2 columns. The item builder will be a grid tile widget. And this one is the picture with the header and the footer. The next thing you need is the item count. We will create 10 items inside this list. And with all of this, you have created a grid view widget. But keep in mind that you can also just use the grid view like this. You don't need to have the .builder. And this was how to use the grid view widget inside your Flutter app. The hero widget. This one can be used to animate the transition between two widgets. In this example, we have an icon which animates the transition inside another page with a different widget. And this is created with the hero widget. Let me show you how it works. First, we'll create a list style. Inside, we will have the trailing hero. The tag will be tag1. Keep this in mind because we will reuse this later. Inside, we have the child icon person. And when we press on this, it will trigger the navigator.push. This will bring us to another page, which will use the material page route and the builder that will return the second page. In other words, this will bring us to another page. The title of this list style will be text click on me. But now it's time to create this second page. We will create the class and return a scaffold widget. Inside we have the app bar second page. The body will be a center with the column. Inside the children of the column, we will have the hero widget. The tag will be the same as the previous one, tag1, and the child will be a container orange accent with the height and the width 100. And just like this, when you press on the list style, this will bring you to the other page and will animate the transition between the two widgets, the icon and the container. The icon widget. In this example, we will create an icon with a shadow behind. Let's do this right now. Inside the center widget, we will create the icon. We will use the icon Flutter dash. The color will be orange accent and the size will be 200. But now, how do we add the shadow? For this, you will use the shadow argument, and inside you will use the box shadow. The color will be black, the offset 8.8, the spread radius and the blur radius will be 10. You can change all of this to your preference. The icon button widget. This is an icon, but also a button at the same time. To create something like this, we will start with the int click equals 0. In the center widget, we will create a column with the children. The first one will be the icon button. This one will need the icon, which we will use the add box. The icon size will be 50. The onPress will set state and add 1 to the click. Just keep in mind that you have many other arguments inside your icon button. Under this one, we will create a text widget that will display the number of clicks. So every time you press on the icon button, this will trigger the function and add 1 to the clicks. The ignore pointer widget. As you can see on the screen, I can click on the click me button, but as soon as I click on this button, I will block the click of the second one. And this is because we use the ignore pointer. To create something like this, we will start by using a boolean ignore set to false. In the center of the app, we use a column widget, and the children will be an elevated button. Inside, we have the onPress function that will trigger the set state and change the value of the ignore boolean. If it's false, it will be true. If it's true, it will be false. Next, the child is a text widget, and if the value is true, then it will be blocked. Otherwise, it will be all good. The style of the elevated button will also change. We will use the elevated button.style from. The primary color will be, if it's true, then it will be red, otherwise green. And you can see that every time I press on this button, the color changes. But now it's time to use the ignore pointer. The argument ignoring will be ignore, which is our boolean we have created. The child will be an elevated button with the onPress function and the child text click me. If the value ignore is true, then the button will not be clickable. But if we change the value to false, then the button will be clickable. And this was how to use the ignore pointer with your Flutter app. The image widget. In this example, I will show you how to use an image, but also how to create a filter of color over it. Inside the center widget, we'll use the image. This one will have the image argument. We will say network image, and we will put the URL of the image. This is the original image. We will also use the color argument to blue, but this is not enough. We also need to use the color blend mode, and we will say color burn. And just like this, you have created a blue filter over your image. The indexed stack widget. If I click on different button, this will change the image on the screen. This is because we use the index stack widget. To create something like this, we will start with the int index equals 0. Inside the padding, we will create a column widget, and in the children, we will start with a row. The children inside the row will be first an elevated button with the text 0. It's the first button you can see on the screen. The onPress will set state and set the index to 0. This is the variable we created at the start. we will create two other elevated buttons, one that will set the index to 1 and one that will set the index to 2. In this way, we can change the value of the index variable. It's now time to create the indexed stack widget. The index argument will be the index variable we created. The children will be 3 different images. And now when we click the buttons to change the index, this will automatically switch between these 3 widgets. This was how to use the index stack widget with your Flutter app. The Inkwell widget. This is a simple container with a text inside, but when I click on it, this will change the color of the widget because we have wrapped the container with the Inkwell widget. Let me show you how it works. First, we will create a variable color set as blue. In the center, we will use the Inkwell widget with the onTap function that will trigger the set state and change the color for red. But you can also use the onDoubleTap or the onLongPress. The child of the Inkwell will be an ink widget with the height and the width 300. The color will be the color variable we created, and the child will be a center text click. You can wrap any widget with the Inkwell to create a button. The input chip widget. This is how the widget looks like. You can press on it to put a check mark, or you can click the delete button. For this, we'll start with the boolean isSelect set as false. In the center of the app, we will use the input chip widget. The avatar will be a circle avatar. Inside, we will say the background image is a network image. The label of the input chip will be a text Einstein. The unselected will return a new boolean value. So every time you click on this, it will trigger the onSelect. For this example, we will set state and say that the isSelect is equal to the invert of the isSelect. Now we can use the argument select is equal to isSelect. This code will create this in the application. But you can also create the selected color. In this example, we use the white 38. You will see this will change just a little bit the color of the input chip. You can also add the delete icon. We will use the cancel outlined and the onDelete, which is a function that is triggered when you press the X button. This was the input chip widget. The interactive viewer widget. You can use this to zoom inside your application. You can see this is a widget inside a scaffold, which I can zoom and dezoom. And this is because of the interactive viewer. Let me show you how to create this. First, we will start with a scaffold widget. The background color will be orange accent. The body will be the interactive viewer. Inside, we will set the boundary margin to edgeInsets.all double infinity. The child will be another scaffold with a navbar. And now you can see that I can move the scaffold pretty much everywhere, and I can also zoom and dezoom everywhere inside the scaffold. But keep in mind that you can use this for any widget. The Layout Builder widget. This one can be used to display different things inside your app depending on the size of the screen. You can see that when the screen is under 600, this is what I see. But if I move the screen on the side, I will have an image. So you can show different things on the app depending on the size of the screen. To create something like this, we will start with the layout builder. The builder argument will have the context and the constraints, and we will say if the constraints.max width is bigger than 600, then we will return a center widget with an image network. And otherwise, we will return a center widget with the text screen under 600. With this, you can see that when I move my screen to the other side, it's over 600, so we can display the image network. The limited box widget. On the screen right now, the list style is limited with its height. And this is what we will do in this video. First, inside the center widget, we will use a single child scroll view. Inside we have the scroll direction axis vertical. The child will be the limited box. The max height will be 50. And we will play with the max width later. Inside we will use the child card, which will be a list style inside. The leading is an icon person, and the title will be Flutter map. Now you can see that the height of the list style is limited. If we also add the max width, you will see that nothing will change. And this is because the limited box works only if the parent is an unconstrained widget, which is the reason we have used the single child scroll view. But now if we change the axis to horizontal, you will see that only the width is working. The height will be the normal size. The linear progress indicator widget. I will show you how to create this one and this one. Let's start right now. The first thing you need is the with ticker provider state mixin. I will tell you why we need this later. Next, you will create a late animation controller. Inside the init state, you will declare this controller with the animation controller. The vsync will use the this, which can be used because we use the with ticker provider. The duration will be 5 seconds, and then you will add a listener that will set state everything. After this, we will say controller.repeat, and the reverse will be true. When you use a controller, make sure that you dispose it inside the dispose method. After this, you can go inside the scaffold widget, create a padding widget, use the column, and inside the children, you will create a linear progress indicator. This one will use the value controller.value, and this is what you have on the screen. But keep in mind that you can also use only the linear progress indicator, and this is what you will have. The listener widget. As you can see, when I press on the screen, this registers a press. Also, it registers the cursor location. But when I release, it will also listen to the release of the screen. So let me show you how to create something like this with your Flutter app. First, we will need 4 variables: the number of presses, the number of release, the double X, and the double Y. This is the location of the cursor. Next, we will create a listener widget. Inside, we will have the on pointer down. This is when we click on the screen, and this will set state and add 1 to the number of press. Then we create the on pointer move. This one will set state and register the location of the cursor. The last one is on pointer up. And this one will set state and add 1 to the number of release. After this, you can create a child. We will use a container infinity with the color orange. This is the background color. Inside the column, we will create the children, which the first one will be a text widget displaying the number of press. We will also add a textile, and we will do the same thing for the number of release with the same textile. And finally, another text, but this one will be the cursor. And you can see that we have the location x.toString and the location y.toString. We will also use a textile. And just like this, you have used the listener widget. The listile widget. This is a box where you can display a leading, a title, and a trailing widget. I will show you how to create this right now. Inside the center widget, we will use the list style. The title will be a text Flutter map. The tile color will be orange accent. You can use an untap function. The leading will be an icon person. And finally, the trailing will be an icon menu. The list view widget. This one is a way to display multiple list styles inside a scrollable list. I will also show you how to create divider between each list style. So let's start right now by using the list view.separated. The item count will be 5. The item builder will have the context and the index, which will return a list style. Because we use the .separated, you will need to create a separator builder. This one will have the context and the index. You can create everything you need between each widget, but for this example, we will just use the divider widget with the color white. And just like this, you have used the list view widget. The list wheel scroll view widget. This is how it looks, and I will show you how to create this right now. First, you need to create the list view scroll view. Inside, you have the item extend, which we will use 100. This is the space between each widget. Next, you can create other arguments if you want to change how it looks, but for this example, we will just use the item extend. The children will be a list.generate. We will use 20 items, and each item will be a list style. And just like this, we have created the list wheel scroll view widget. The long press draggable widget. This one can be used to select an item and move the location of the item. So let me show you how it works. First, we create a variable offset, which will be the location of the image when we start. Then inside a center widget, we use a layout builder. This one have the context and the constraints. We will need this to know where is the location of the widget. Inside, we will use a stack widget, which will have children. The first one is the positioned. So we will position the widget from the left with the offset.x-axis. We will do the same thing with the top with the offset.dy. Inside we have the child, which will be the long press draggable. First argument will be the feedback. It will be an image network, but with a color orange and a blend mode color burn. The feedback is the image we can see on the screen when we drag the widget. After this, you have the child widget, which will be also an image, but this one is the original image. The argument onDragEnd will have the details, and inside you will set state and create an adjustment of the image location. After you will set your offset variable using the adjustment we just created. And just like this, you have created a long press draggable widget, which can be used to move anything inside your app. The material app. This is one of the most common, but I want to show you things that maybe you don't know. So let's start right now by creating a theme. First, you can create a theme, and for this example, we will just put the theme data.light. But you can also put a dark theme. Since the application is already in a dark theme, I can change the theme by using the theme mode.light. You will see in a couple seconds it will work. Next, I will use the debug show checked mode banner as false, so we don't have the banner on the right side. The home will be a scaffold widget. And now if I refresh the screen, you will see we are inside a theme mode.light. If I replace the theme mode by dark, now it will be a dark app. The next thing I want to show you is the localization delegate and the supported locales. I will link all the documentation in the description of this video, but this can be used to control the language of your application. By example, English or Spanish. If you want to learn more, you can search about localization with Flutter. The material banner widget. And this is what we will be able to create at the end of this video. You have a little pop-up from the top that you can dismiss at any time. To create this, we'll start with a center widget, an elevated button with the text open. The onPress function will have the scaffold messenger.ofContext.showMaterialBanner. Inside we use the material banner widget. You can create a padding. The content will be just the text subscribe, so you can see it's this information. The leading will be an icon notification. The elevation will be 5, the background color white 12. And the actions will have a text button with the onPress function that will trigger the scaffold messenger.ofContext.hide the current material banner. The child will be dismissed. And just like this, you have created a material banner with your Flutter app. The material button widget. If I click on this button, it will be yellow, but if I press long enough, it will be red. And this is because we use the material button. Inside the center widget, we will create the material button. Inside we have the onPress function, the child will be a text click, and the highlight color will be orange accent. This is what we have on the screen. You can also change the splash color to red accent. This is when you keep pressing on the button. And finally, we will use the color blue-gray to display a color of the button. And that's it. The merge semantic widget. This is what you will have at the end, but let me show you what is the purpose. First thing first, you will need to go inside your material app and add the show semantic debugger to true. This is what you will see on the screen. Next, we will use the merge semantic widget. Inside we will have a row and the children will be one text and another one. You can see that the semantics is only one block right now. But if we remove the merge semantic widget, you will see that we have two different semantic blocks. This was how to merge semantics inside your Flutter app. The modal barrier widget. All the orange is what we call the modal barrier. And when we click on it, this will disappear and we can reactivate the modal barrier by clicking on this button. And I will show you how to create this with your Flutter app. We start by creating a variable activated, which will be set as true. Inside the stack widget, we will create the children. The first one is a center, which will be the elevated button. The onPress function will trigger the set state, which will change the value of the activated boolean. If it's true, it will be false. If it's false, it will be true. The child of the elevated button is a text reactivate. After, inside this stack widget, we will create an if condition. If it's activated, then we will create an opacity widget with the opacity 0.4, and the child will be the modal barrier. There is an argument called dismissible. We will set this one as true. The argument undismissed will have a set state, which will reverse the value of the activated boolean. I also added a color orange, so it's more visual for you. Okay, so when I click on this, it will not press on the button, but deactivate the modal barrier. And then I will be able to click on the button. But if you want, you can set the dismissible to false. And in this way, no matter what, how many times I click on the screen, this will never remove the modal barrier. And this was how to use the modal barrier with your Flutter app. The system mouse cursors. And for this example, we will need to have the web Flutter. Because as you can see, when I take my mouse and I put it over the widget, we will have the grab icon. Let me show you how it works. First thing first, inside a center widget, you will create the mouse region. In the argument cursor, you will use the system mouse cursor.grab. After, we will use the child container with the width and the height, 200 and 100. The decoration will be a box decoration, box-shaped circle with the color orange. And just like this, when you put your mouse over the widget, it will create a grab icon. But keep in mind that you can use many different icons. By example, the cell. So if I go over, we will have this icon. That's it. The mouse region widget. And in this example, we will need to use the web flutter. So if I take my cursor and I go inside the box, this will register the number of enters and also the cursor location. But as soon as I exit the container, this will also register the exit. And you can create something like this by using the mouse cursor widget. First thing first, we need to create 4 arguments: the enter count, the exit count, the position X and Y. And inside the center widget, we will use the mouse region. This one will have the argument onEnter, and with this we can set state and add 1 to the enter count. We will do the onOver also with a set state and register the position of the cursor by using the detail.position.x and y. The third one is the onExit. This one will be a set state and we will add the exit count. With this you can create a child container. I will use the color orange, and inside we have a column widget with multiple children. The first one will be the text enter count. This will register how many times we enter inside the widget. You can also add the text exit, which will use the exit count, and finally the text cursor. This will have the X position .toString and the Y position .toString. And just like this, you have used the mouse cursor widget to register the number of enter and exit inside the widget. The navigation bar widget. This is what you will be able to create at the end of this video. First thing first, we will add a int current index and also a list, which we will call body, of multiple icons. With this, we can go inside the scaffold widget and create a center widget. The child will be the body.element@, of the current index. This is the variable we created. After this, we will use the bottom navigation bar with the navigation bar widget. This one will use the destinations, and it will require multiple navigation destination. The icon will be home and the label will be home. If you put only one of them, you will have a red screen. So make sure that you have multiple navigation destination. But now the buttons are not clickable. To make this work, you will need to use the selected index, which will be the current index. And then when you trigger the onDestination select, you will be able to set state and say that the current index is now equal to the index you just received with the onDestination select. And now you are able to change pages inside your app with the navigation bar widget. The notification listener widget. If I start to scroll the screen, you will see scroll updated. But if I stop, you will see scroll ended. But how can we do this with Flutter? For this, you will need to use the notification listener. So the first thing you need is to create a string message new. Then inside a column widget, you will create first a container. This one will have the height 60, the color orange accent, the child will be a center. And inside we have the text message, which is the variable we created. This is the orange block you can see on the screen. Next, you will create an expanded widget, which will have a child of the notification listener. The argument onNotification will receive the scroll notification, which you can use inside conditions. If the scroll notification is a scroll start notification, then you will set state and you will set the message as scroll started. Otherwise, if the scroll notification is a scroll update notification, you will set state the screen and you will set the message as scroll updated. If it's not the case, then you will say another condition if it's a scroll end notification. Then you will update and you will say scroll end. At the end, you will just put return true. The child will be a listView.builder. The item count will be 100. The item builder will have the context and the index. Inside, you will return a list style with the item number. If I refresh the application, you will see new on the top. When I start to scroll, you will see scroll update. Then you will see scroll end when I release. And if I just click on the screen, you will see scroll started. So that's it. The offstage widget. As you can see, when I press the button, we have the icon Flutter Dash, but when I repress, the icon will disappear. I will show you how to use this widget. First, we will create a variable isHided, which we will set as true. Inside the sized box, we will use the width double.infinity, child column, and in the children, we will use the offstage widget. The offstage argument will use the variable we created, and the child will be an icon Flutter Dash. Under this one, we will create an elevated button, which will have the text isHided is equal equal to the variable. And the onPress function will set state and change the value of the isHided. If it's true, it will be false. If it's false, it will be true. And now you can hide and show widget inside your app. The opacity widget. On the screen, we use the opacity widget. This is 3 times the same widget that use different value of the opacity. For this, we will use a column, and inside this column, we will use the opacity widget. The opacity argument will be 1, which means it will be completely visible, and the child will be a container orange with the text Flutter inside. But we will also create another opacity with 0.5. And a last one with the opacity 0.1. And now you have different opacity for the same widget. The orientation builder widget. You can see on the screen right now, this is a portrait mode. But as soon as I turn the screen, this is now landscape. I will show you how to do this with your Flutter app. First, we create a widget orientation builder. The builder would have the context and the orientation, and inside we will use a conditions. If the orientation is equal to orientation.portrait, then we will return a center widget with the text portrait. Otherwise, we will return a center widget with the text landscape. And just like that, you have used the orientation builder widget with your Flutter app. The outlined button widget. This is a button you can create with Flutter. First, inside the center widget, we will use the outlined button. The onPress function will be an empty function, and the child will be text click me. And this is what you will have. But you can change the color of the button and the text of the button by using the style outlined button.styleFrom. The primary color.white will be the text inside the button, and the background color will be the background of the button. The overflow bar widget. This one is a mix between the row widget and the column widget. I will show you how it works. Inside the padding, we will create the overflow bar. The spacing will be all the spacing between each widget. The children will be an elevated button Flutter map, and we will create 2 other elevated buttons. But now, what will happen if we add another button? In this case, it will become a column widget. So as soon as we don't have place on the screen anymore, this will transform into a column widget. The overflow box widget. This one will allow you to create widgets that go outside the boundary of the parent widget. So inside the center widget, we will create a container with the width and the height 100. The color will be orange accent. Now inside the child, we will use the overflow box. Because we set the max width and the max height to 200, and inside we put a container with the color red opacity 0.5 and the width and height infinity, this will create a widget that overflows the parent widget. The padding widget. On the screen we have a card with a text inside, but we also have a padding around the text. This is because inside the center widget, we use the card widget, which have the padding inside. The argument padding from this widget will use the agentsets.all20. But you have multiple other possibilities. You can put agentsets.0, .symmetrics, .fromLTRB, which mean left top, right, bottom. And inside this widget, you have a child, which we will use the text. If we put 80 instead of 20, you will see the padding is way bigger. And this was the padding widget. The page view widget. This is what you will be able to create. And to make this, we will start with the page view widget. Inside, we will use the children, and we will create 3 different containers. One which will be orange with the text 1, one that will be red accent with the text 2, and one that will be blue-gray with the text 3. And with only this code, you will have something like this in your Flutter app. The physical model widget. On the screen, we have an orange circle and a red shadow behind. And this is because of the physical model. Let's make this right now. First, we will use the background color of the scaffold white because I want to make sure that you see the shadow. The body will be the center with the physical model. The elevation is 20. The shadow color will be red accent. The color of the actual circle is orange accent. And the shape will be a box shape dot circle. Inside, we will use the sized box. The width and the height will be 200, and the child will be a center with the icon Flutter Dash. And this was how to use the physical model widget with Flutter. The physical shape widget. This will allow you to create rounded corner. Inside the center widget, we will use the physical shape. The elevation will be 5. The clipper will be a shape border clipper. Inside, we will use the rounded rectangle border with the border radius circular 40. We need also to put the color orange accent, and the child will be a sized box the height and the width will be 250. The child will be a center widget with the icon Flutter Dash inside. And that's it. The placeholder widget. This one can be used if you are in development, if you don't have the actual image. So inside a column, we'll create in the children a placeholder. This is how it looks like. You can change the fallback height to 300, but if you try to change the fallback width to 50, nothing will change because the width is a defined value. And the fallback height is working only because we use a column widget. You can also change the color of this placeholder. But if we change the column for a row, you will see that the width is now 50 and the height is everything. This was the placeholder widget. The platform menu bar widget. This widget is only available with Mac OS. And you can see it's actually this thing. You will have the about, message, and quit everything. And I will show you how to create this with Flutter. You will need to start with the platform menu bar. Inside you will add the menus. The first one will be the platform menu with the label platform menu, the menu inside. And the first one is the platform menu item group. Inside we have the members, which use the platform menu item. We can give a label and unselected. This one is the first you can see on the screen. Right under, we will create another platform menu item group. We will also use the members to use the platform menu. Inside, we will create a label message, but also another menu. Because you can see that if we go on the widget, the messages have a sub menu. And for this, inside the menu list, we create another platform menu item. We have the unselect, the shortcut, and the label learn more. This one is inside the messages learn more. And you can see that we have a shortcut command, which is the F. And this is because we use the shortcut. Next, at the end, we will say if the platform provider menu item has a menu. Inside, we will put the platform provider menu item type.quit. And if it's the case, then we will say platform provider menu item, and the type will be the platform provider menu item type.quit. In other words, if we go over the widget, you will see that we have a third option, quit every Flutter widget. This will close the entire application. You can use it if you want. Finally, in the body, we will use a center widget with the text Flutter map. This is the text that you can see in the center of the app. And just like this, you have created a menu inside your Mac OS application. The pop-up menu button. On the screen, we have a list tile, and when we press on the icon, we have a pop-up menu. And you can select the second item to change the list tile. To create something like this, we will start with 3 variables, the title, the item 1, and the item 2. The title is what you can see on the list tile. Next, inside the list tile, we will create the title, which will use the text title. The trailing will be the pop-up menu button. Inside, you will use the item builder with the context, and this will return you a list. The first one will be a pop-up menu item. The child will be the text item 1, which is first item, and the value will be also item 1. You will create another pop-up menu item. The child will be a text item 2, and the value also. The argument on select will return you the new value select, and you will be able to set state the application and set the title to the new value. And with this, you have created a pop-up menu button inside your Flutter app, the positioned widget. With this, you will be able to display 3 different images, one over the other, but with different position. Let's start with a center widget, then a stack widget. The children will be a positioned widget. Inside we have the left 20, the top 20, and the child will be an image network. This will position the image 20 from the left and 20 from the top. Next, we will create another positioned with the left 60 and the top 120. And you can see that the position is coming from this information. We will finally add another positioned with the left 100 and top 220. And this was how to use the positioned widget with your Flutter app. The positioned transition widget. This is what you will have at the end. So let's start first by creating the with single taker provider state mixin, because we will need this later. Then you will create an animation controller. This one will need inside the duration, which will be 2 seconds, and the vsync this. This is available because we use the single taker provider state mixin. Next, you will say dot repeat, and the reverse will be true. It will allow the animation to go back and forth. When you use a controller, make sure that you dispose it with the dispose method. Next, you will create 2 variables, a double small logo and a double big logo, because on the top it's smaller and on the bottom it's bigger. And now it's time to use the layout builder. This one will have the context and the constraints. Inside, you will create a variable biggest, which will be the constraints.biggest. You will then return a stack widget. Inside you will add the positioned transition. The rect will be a relative rect tween.animate. To create what you see on the screen, you will need to put things inside the relative rect tween. The first one is the begin. It will use a relative rect.fromSize, and the end will use the same thing. But now let's add the logic inside it. For the begin, we will use the rect.fromLeftTopWidthHeight, and this is all the logic for the position of the widget. At the end of the animation, we will create a different logic. You see that we use the biggest.width and biggest.height. This is coming from the variable we created at the start. After this, inside the animate, you will use the curved animation. Inside you have the parent, which is the controller you created at the start, and the curve, which is the slow middle. You can see the animation is slower in the middle. The next thing you need is a child, which will be the padding. Inside we have a container, a shaped circle, and the color orange. And with all of this, you will create an animation like this one. The preferred size widget. This can be used to create your own app bar widget. So the first thing you need is to create the preferred size widget inside the app bar of the scaffold. The argument preferred size will be a size from height, and we will use 80. The child will be a container with the height 120. The decoration will be a box decoration. Because we want to have a gradient, we will use the linear gradient widget. The colors of the gradient will be color red and orange. Next, we need to create a child, which we will use the safe area. The child will be a center, and the child of the center will be a list tile widget. We have the title Flutter map and the trailing icon search. And just like this, you have created your own app bar widget. The radio widget. On the screen, we have two selectable items using the radio widget. To create something like this, we start with a list of string called options, which have the option 1 and 2. Then we create a string current option, which will be the option number 1. In the column widget, we create a list tile. The title will be option 1. The leading will be the radio widget. The value is the option 0. Which means the option 1. The group value will be the current option. And the unchanged will return a value, which we can use to set state and set the current option to the value.toString. If the value and the group value is the same, then the radio button will be activated. So now let's create the second option. We create another list tile, the title option 2, the leading radio, the value is the option 1, which means it will be the option 2. And then you can add the group value, the current option, which is the variable we created. The unchanged will return the value that we set state to set the current option to the value.toString. Like this, you have created two radio widgets. The radio list tile widget. At the end, this is what you will have on the screen. And to create this, we will start with a list of string called options. The string current option will be option 0. The column will have multiple widgets. The first one is the radio list tile. You can put a title, which will be option 1. The value will be the option with the index 0. The group value will be the current option. And the unchanged will return you the value that you can use to set state and set the current option to the new value. This is pretty much the same thing as the radio button, but already inside a list tile. Now we will create another one with the title option 2, the value option with the index 0, the value options with the index 1, group value current option, and the unchanged will set state and set the current option. And like this, you have created two radio list tile. The range slider widget. This is what you will have at the end. First, we start by creating a range value. This will be 0.1 to 0.5, which we call values. Next, we create a variable labels. This will be a range labels. And inside, we put the values.start.toString and the value.end. With this, you can return a center widget with the range slider. Inside, you will put the value, which will be the value variable we created. The division will be 10. The labels will be labels. And the unchanged will return you the new values, which you can set state to set the values with the new values. And just like that, you have created a range slider widget, the raw autocomplete widget. This will give you multiple suggestions inside your text field, and you will be able to select them to autocomplete the text field. To create something like this, we will start with a list of string. This will return the list where each item needs to respect the following condition. If the item contains the text editing value, the text that we just enter in the text field, then it will return true, and it will be one of our suggestions. Next, you will need the field view builder. This one will give you access to the controller, text editing controller, focus node, and on field submitted. With this, you can return a padding. The child will be a text form field. This is what you see on the screen. You will need to put the text editing controller inside and the focus node. For the onFill submit, you will trigger the onFill submitted. Next, you will need to create an option view builder. This one will have the context, the onSelect, and the options. With this, you can return the align widget. The child will be a padding, which inside we will put the material. Otherwise, you will see that the box will not work. The elevation will be 4. The sized box will have a height of 200. This is the height of the box. The child will be a listView.builder with a padding, and the item count is the options.length. The item builder will have the context and the index. With this, you can create a variable option, which will be options.element@index. And we will return a gesture detector. When we press on it, this will trigger the onSelect with the current option. And the child will be a list style with the title text option. And with all this, you have created the raw autocomplete widget, the raw chip widget. And this is what you will have at the end. First, inside the center widget, we use the raw chip widget. The label will be the text raw chip. The avatar will be an icon person, which is the leading of the raw chip. You can also add a delete icon. We will use the remove circle, the onPress function, and the onDeleted. And with only this little code, you have created the raw chip widget, the refresh indicator widget. In this example, I can refresh my list to have one more item inside. Let's create this right now with Flutter. First, you will start with a list of items. I will say item 1 and 2. And you will build the refresh indicator. This one will have the onRefresh, which will be an async function. The first thing we do is we will wait for 1 second, and then we will define the next item, which will be the items.length +1. We will add this item inside the list of items we have. And finally, we will set state. The child of the refresh indicator will be a listView.builder. And if you want to change the color of the refresh indicator, you can say color equal white and background color is equal to orange accent. This was the refresh indicator, the reorderable list view. On the screen, we have a list, but we can reorder every item inside this one. First, we will need to create a list of items. This one will be a list.generate of 30 items. Next, we use the reorderable list view widget. Inside, we have the children, which will be a list.generate also. The items.length will be the number of items inside the list. And then each item will be a list style. Make sure that you put the key, which will be in this example, a key with the index inside. The tile color will depend if the item is odd or not. The title will be the item and the index of the item. The trailing will be the drag handle sharp icon. And after you need to create the onReorder, this one will give you the old index and the new index. With this, you can create a logic. You can say set state. If the old index is smaller than the new index, then you will say that the new index is -1. You can then create a final item is equal to item.remove@old index, and then insert the item at the new index location. This is just all the logic to make sure that when you move an item, it go to another place. And this was how to use the reorderable list view with Flutter, the rich text widget. With this, you will be able to put different type of text inside the same line. And for this, we start with a center widget. Inside, we have the rich text widget. The text argument will take a text span. You can give a default style if you want. And as you can see inside the children, we will put one text span. This one will just be the text to the, which use the default text style. Then you can create another text span, but if you change the style of this one, it will be override and you will see that moon have a different text style, which use the font weight bold and the color white. Finally, we will put a last text span with the and beyond. So if I remove the font weight bold from the moon, then you will see that this will not be bold anymore because it use the default text style. The rotated box widget. On the screen, we have the Flutter logo, which is rotated 1/4 of a turn. And you can do this by implementing the rotated box widget. The quarter turn argument will be 1. The child will be a Flutter logo. And this is what you will see on the screen. If you change the quarter turn for 2, you will see the Flutter logo will turn even more. This was the rotated box widget. The rotation transition widget. This is a Flutter logo which turn and come back. And this is because we use the rotation transition widget. Let me show you how it works. First thing first, you will need to create a width ticker provider state mixin. Then you can create a late final animation controller variable. This one will have a duration of 1 second and we'll use the vsync this. The vsync this is only available because we use the width ticker provider state mixin. Then you can say repeat reverse equal through. This means the animation will repeat forever. After this, we create another variable animation, which is a curved animation. The parent will be the controller we just created, and the curve will be a curves that is in circle. Because we use a controller, we need to also dispose it. And for the UI, we can say use the rotation transition. The turns argument will be the animation we created. The child will be a padding with a Flutter logo inside. And with all of this, you have created the rotation transition widget. The row widget. This can be used to display multiple widgets one after the other. For this, we start with a sized box height and width doubled at infinity, which means take the entire screen. Then we create the row widget. The children will be 3 expanded widgets, and inside we have the elevated button. The row and the expanded widget work pretty well together, and you can see that this will take the entire screen. Next, we will add another expanded widget with another elevated button. And finally, another expanded with another elevated button. And this will give you multiple widgets on the horizontal axis. This was the row widget. The scaffold. This can be used to create a drawer. You can also use it to create all the skeleton of your app, add a floating button in the middle, and also a navigation bar in the bottom. Let me show you how it works. First, we will create a variable int count at 0. Inside the build, we will return the scaffold widget. If you want, you can change the background color. We will use orange accent. There is an argument called app bar. This is the bar on the top of your application. The body argument will be all the widget in the middle of the skeleton of the app. If you need to have a drawer inside your application, you can use the argument drawer and use a widget called drawer also. Just like this, you have a button which you can press and access a menu. In the scaffold, you can also add the floating action button location. For this one, we will use the center dot, but you will also need to create a floating action button. Keep in mind that you can change the location of the floating action button wherever you want. Next, you have also the possibility to add a bottom navigation bar. For this example, we'll just use the bottom navigation bar widget, and this can give you a big picture of what you can do with the scaffold. The scale transition widget. On the screen, the scale of the Flutter logo is animated, and I will show you how to create this right now. First, you will need to add the width ticker provider state mixin. Inside, we will create an animation controller. This one will have a duration of 1 second, and we will use the vsync this. This is only available because we use the width ticker provider state mixin. Next, you will say dot repeat with a reverse through. This means the animation will always keep going. After this, you can create another variable animation, which is a curved animation. The parent will be the controller we just created, and the curve will be a curves that fast outflow in. Because we use the controller, we need to also dispose the controller. And inside the build, we will return a center widget, the scale transition widget. This one have the argument scale, which is the animation we just created. The child will be a Flutter logo 150. And just like this, you have created a Flutter logo with an animated scale. The scroll bar widget. If you want to have a scroll bar like this in your app, then you can use the scroll bar widget. First, we will need to create a controller scroll controller. Then we will return the scroll bar widget. We will give the controller we just created. The child will be a listview.builder. Inside, you can put the same controller. The item count will be 40 items. And the item builder will be a list style with the item and the index +1. So just like this, you have access to a scroll bar inside your app. The selectable text widget. This will most likely be useful inside your Flutter web app, but you can put this in any app. And to use this, we will start with the center widget. Inside, we will have the selectable text. The first thing you need to add is the text. Then you can create also a style if you want. There is an argument called the onSelection changed, and this will give you the information about the text selection you just did. Inside, you can put any logic that you want. And this was how to create a selectable text with Flutter. The semantic widget. With this, you will be able to create a semantic for any of your widget. This can be used for people using voice description inside their app. And if you want to work with semantic, you will need to start by going inside your material app and add the function showSemanticDebugger to true. After this, we can create our own widget inside the body of the scaffold. First, we start with a center, then we have the column widget. The children will be first a semantic widget. The child of this one will be the Flutter logo. But if you want to see the description of the semantic, you need to add the label, this is the Flutter logo. And now you can see the semantic of the Flutter logo. Under the semantic widget, we will add another Flutter logo widget. And if I save, you can see that we don't have the semantic of this one. And this is because it's not wrapped with the semantic widget. The shadow mask widget. This is a text with a gradient inside, and I will show you how to create this using the shader mask widget. Inside a padding, we will create a child center. The child of this one will be the shader mask. And inside you can use the shader callback. This one will give you access to the rect. The return will be a radial gradient. And then you will need to say dot, create a shader with the bound we just received. Inside the radial gradient, you will need to put the center argument, which is an alignment. The radius will be 4. And the color will be orange accent and red accent. But as for now, you will see nothing on the screen because you need to add also the tile mode, which is the tile mode.mirror, but also create the child, which will be the text widget. This is a cool looking text with a style 40. And just like this, you created a gradient text inside your Flutter app. The shortcut widget. If you want to trigger something in your app only using the keyboard, you can use the shortcut widget. When I press the up arrow and when I press the down arrow, this will change the number of the counter. Let me show you how you can create this. First, you will need to create two classes. One called the increment intent that extend the intent, and the second one, decrement intent. Again, we extend the intent. Now we can go down and create a variable int count starting at 0. In the return of the build, we will use the shortcuts widget. The arguments shortcuts will need to have the logical key set. And inside you can define which key inside your keyboard will be used. This will be a map. So when you press on this button, something happens. And this something will be the increment intent. We will add another logical key set. This one will be the arrow down and will be linked with the decrement intent. For the child, we will create the actions. The actions argument will be also a map. The key of the first one is the increment intent, and this will trigger a callback action. Inside we have the onInvoke, which will trigger the set state and say that the count is equal to the count plus 1. We will do the same thing for the decrement intent. We use the callback action. When we invoke this will trigger the set state and set the count as -1. The child of the actions will be a focus. Make sure that you have this one, otherwise it will not work. The child is a center widget with the text counter and the actual count. And now if we refresh the application and I put my mouse outside the app, you will see that when I press the up arrow, this will add 1 to the counter. And if I press the down arrow, this will decrease the counter. This was the shortcuts widget. The simple dialog widget. When you will press the show dialog button, you will have a pop-up on your screen, and this is the simple dialog. So first, inside the center widget, we will create an elevated button first, because we need something to press on it to display the actual pop-up. The onPress will trigger the show dialog. Inside we have the context and the builder. The builder will return the simple dialog widget. Inside we have the title. This is the title. Then you can also add a content padding and also children. The first one will be a text more information, and the second one will be a text button. When we press on it, this will trigger the navigator.ofcontext.pop because we want to close the pop-up, and the child will be a text close. Finally, for the elevated button to work, we will need to have the child text show dialog. And just like this, you have created a simple dialog with your Flutter app. The single child scroll view widget. This can be used to make any widget scrollable. First, we will return the single child scroll view widget. The child will be a column. Inside this one, we will create a list.generate. We will have 50 items, and each item will be a list style widget. You can see that the list is scrollable. But what if we don't have the single child scroll view? If I remove the widget and I save, you will see that we will have an error. So I will put it back, I will save again, and you can see that you can use the single child scroll view to make any widget scrollable. The size transition widget. On the screen we have a Flutter logo, which the size is animated. And I will show you how to create something just like this. First, we start by creating the width ticker provider state mixin. Then we need to create an animation controller, which will have a duration of 2 seconds. The vsync this is accessible because we use the width ticker provider state mixin. After, we will say repeat and reverse through. This just means the animation will repeat forever. Next, we can create an animation with the curved animation. The parent will be the controller we just created. The curve will be a curves.isInSyn. And as you know, when we use a controller, we need to also dispose the controller. After this, inside the build, we can return the size transition widget. The size factor will be the animation we just created. The axis will be axis horizontal. The alignment will be -1. And the child of this size transition widget will be a center with the Flutter logo. And this was how to use the size transition widget in your Flutter app. The sized box widget. The size of the orange box is determined because we use the sized box widget. You will see this is very simple. We use the sized box, we will put the height and the width at 300. Then we can create a child, which will be a card. The color will be orange accent, and the child will be a center with a text Flutter map. You will see that if you remove the height and the width, the card will take the entire screen. So I will put them back, I will save, and this was the sized box widget. The sized overflow box. This will allow you to put a widget inside another one that can actually take more place than the parent widget. For this, we create a center widget, a container with the color orange. The child will be a sized overflow box. The size will be 100, 100. And everything that is inside the sized overflow box can take more place than the 100, 100. So if we put a child with the elevated button, this is a button, you will see that this widget is taking more place than its parent. And this was the sized overflow box. The slide transition widget. You can see the animation on the screen, and this is what we will build right now. So first thing first, you will need to add the width single ticker provider state mixin. After this, we will create an animation controller called controller. The duration will be 2 seconds, and then you need to put the vsync this, which will be available only because we use the width single ticker provider state mixin. Next, we will say repeat, reverse, through. This means the animation will repeat forever. After this, you can create an offset animation. This one will be a tween offset.animate. Inside the tween, you will put the begin offset.0 and the end offset 0, 1.5. In the animate, you will put a curved animation. This one will have the parent controller, which we just created. The curve will be the curves.elastic in. As you know, every time you use a controller, you will need to also dispose the controller. And now inside a center widget, you can create the slide transition widget. The position will be offset animation. This is the animation we created before. The child will be a padding with the Flutter logo inside. And with all of this, you have created a slide transition animation in your Flutter app. The slider widget. If you need something like this in your app, you can use the slider widget. To build this, we will start with a double current slider value at 20. The build will return the slider widget. The value will be the current slider value we just created. Max is the maximum value of the slider, and division is how many division you have in your slider. The label will be the current slider value rounded to string. This is the value you can see on the screen when you move the slider. The onChange function will give you a new value, which you can use to set state and set the new value of the current slider value to this value. And this was how to create a slider widget. The sliver app bar widget. If you want to create an app bar just like this one, I will show you how to use the sliver app bar widget. We will start by using the custom scroll view widget. Inside you can put the sliver argument. This is a list of sliver. So you will use first the sliver app bar widget. If you set the argument pin as true, that means that when you scroll, you will see an app bar on the top. If you put this as false, this will disappear when you scroll. Floating set as true just means that as soon as you start scrolling, you will see the app bar is coming back. You don't have to wait until you are on the top of the list. The expanded height is the height of the image. Then you can create a flexible space bar. Inside we will use the title Flutter map, and the background will be an image asset with the boxfit.cover. But now we still need to have a scrollable widget, otherwise it doesn't work. So we will create another sliver. This one will be a sliver list. With this, you can actually see the sliver app bar in action. Just so you see the difference, I will put the pinned as false and I will put the floating as false also. Now you can see that if I scroll, the app bar will completely disappear. And it will reappear only when I reach the top of the list. The sliver fixed extend list. If you need a list of items, but inside a sliver, you can use this widget. We will start with a custom scroll view, and inside the slivers, we will create the sliver fixed extend list. We will set the item extend at 50, and the delegate sliver child builder delegate will have the context and the index. With this, we can return a container, the alignment center, and the color will change between white 12 and white 38, depending if it's even or not. The child will be the item and the index. We will also set the child count to 30. And like this, we have created the sliver fixed extend list widget. The sliver grid widget. With this widget, you will be able to create something like this. We start inside a custom scroll view, we have the slivers, and we will put the sliver grid. The grid delegate will be the sliver grid delegate with fixed cross-axis count. The cross-axis count will be 3. This just means we will have 3 different columns. Then the delegate will be the sliver child builder delegate. Inside we have access to the context and the index, which we will use to return a container with the alignment center. The color will depend on the index, and the child will be the text item and the number of the item. At the end, we will add the child count because we want to have 30 items inside our list. The sliver list widget. This is what we will create right now. So we start inside a custom scroll view. We have the slivers and we use the sliver list widget. The delegate will be the sliver child builder delegate, which give us access to the context and the index in order to create a list style and put in the title a text widget with the item and the index +1. The tile color will depend on the index. We will also create the child count to 50 because we want to have 50 items inside our list. And this was how to create the sliver list widget. The sliver opacity widget. This is 3 sliver opacity widget, and let's create them right now. We start by creating the custom scroll view widget. In the list of slivers, we will create the sliver opacity. You can give the opacity at 0.1, and the sliver will be a sliver list. Inside, we can put the delegate sliver child list delegate, and in this list, we will just put one widget, the card widget, with a child sized box and a center text Flutter map. And this is what you will have on the screen. But now I will create 2 other sliver opacity, one with the opacity 0.5 and one with the opacity 0.8. And this was how to use the sliver opacity widget in your Flutter app. The sliver padding widget. Inside the custom scroll view widget, you will have the slivers. This is a list of multiple slivers, and the one we will use is the sliver padding. The padding argument will be edgeInsets.all50, and the sliver will be a sliver list with the delegate sliver child list delegate. Inside we have a list of widget, but we will create only one, and it will be an image network. And you can see that we have now a padding of 50 around our image. The sliver to box adapter. This will allow you to display any widget in a sliver list, but as simple as possible. So inside a custom scroll view, we will create the slivers, and the widget inside will be the sliver to box adapter. The child will be a sized box, the height 20, the child a center with the text sliver to box adapter. And like this, you can display any widget as fast as possible inside a sliver to box adapter. The snack bar widget. When you press on this button, this will display a snack bar and it will disappear automatically after a while. And to create something like this, we need to create first an elevated button with the text show snack bar. The onPress function will trigger the scaffold messenger.ofContext.show snack bar. Inside we will put the snack bar widget. The contents will be Flutter map. This is just the information inside the snack bar. The action will be the snack bar action. The label will be undo and the onPress will be nothing for now. But keep in mind that you can trigger anything when you press the undo button. And just like this, you can trigger a snack bar widget in your Flutter app. The spacer widget. This is 3 different arranged containers. In between, we use the spacer widget. So inside a column widget, we will create the children. The first one will be a container, color orange and height 100. Next, we will create a spacer widget with the flex 1. After, if we create another container, you will see that this one will be at the end of the column. And this is because the spacer will take as much place as possible. But now if we add another spacer but with the flex 2, this means this widget will also take as much place as possible, but will be 2 times bigger than the other spacer widget. And now if we add a third container, you will see that we have 2 spacer widgets and one is 2 times bigger than the other one. The stack widget. On this example, we have 2 images, one over the other. And this is because we use the stack widget. In a center widget, we will create the stack widget. This one will take a list of children. The first widget, which will be under everything, will be the center widget with an image asset ocean. And now we will create another center widget with the image asset blue.jpg. And you can see that the other image will stack over the first one. This was how to use the stack widget. The stepper widget. This will create a step-by-step flow inside your app. To make something like this, we start by creating a variable current step set as 0. In a center widget, we use the stepper widget with the step argument. The first one will be a step. The argument isActive is a true or false boolean. And we will define this by saying the current step is equal to 0. If this is true, you will see the information of the current step. Next, you can create a title. It will be step 1, and the content can be anything. We will use a text with information for step 1. But now we will create 2 other steps. This one will be the step number 2 with a different logic, and the step number 3 with also a different logic. And now I will show you how to trigger those buttons. First, you will need to use the onStep tab, which gives you a new index. With this, you can set state and set the current step to the new index. Now you can see that I can press on the other steps, but nothing really happened. This is because we need to set the current step to the variable current step. Now if I click, you will see that the steps are changing. After this, we can use the onStep continue. This will say if the current step is not the last one, then you will move forward and go one step further. We will also use the onStep cancel. And if it's not the first item, then we will set state and go back from one item before. So now you can click continue and cancel to go back. But you can also change the type with the stepper type.horizontal, and this will give you an horizontal stepper widget. The stream builder widget. In this example, new data are coming inside the application, and every time we receive a new data, the value will change. We will start by creating a fake Firebase stream. This one will be called the generate stream. The first thing we will do inside is wait for 2 seconds, and then we will receive the value 1. Then we will wait for 1 second and receive the value 2. Later in this example, I will show you what happens if we throw an error. The third one will wait for 1 second and receive the value 3. Now that we have created a fake Firebase stream, we can put inside a center widget the stream builder. The stream will be the generate stream that we just created. The initial data will be 0, and the builder will have the context and the snapshot. We will create a condition. If the snapshot.connection state is equal waiting, then we will return a circular progress indicator. If the snapshot has an error, then we will display a text error. And otherwise, we will say a text snapshot.data.toString. And now if we refresh the application, you will see that this will load for 2 seconds, display the value 1, 2, and 3. But now let's throw an error right after the value number 2. Now I will refresh the app and you will see 1 and then the error. This is because we have the condition. If we have an error, then display the text error. The switch widget. If you need a button just like this, you can do it with the switch widget. First, we create a variable boolean isSwitched set as false. In the center widget, we create the switch widget. The value will be the boolean isSwitched, and the onChange will have the value, which we will set state and set the isSwitch to the new value. This will give you access to a switch widget. The switch liststyle widget. If you need a liststyle with a switch at the end, you can use this widget. First, we create a boolean light is equal to false. In the center widget, we will use the switch liststyle. The title will be text light, the value will be the light boolean, and the onChange will return you a new value, which you can use to set state the light variable to the new value. But if you want to put an icon also before the light text, you can use the secondary icon light bulb outline, and this will give you an icon at the leading. The tab bar widget. This is what you will be able to create with the tab bar widget. The first thing you need is a default tab controller. You will set the number of items inside your tab bar. The child will be a scaffold widget with the app bar. Inside we have the bottom, and we will use the tab bar widget. The tabs argument will require 3 different tabs. The first one is home, then setting, then person. After this, we will also create a title with the text Flutter map. In the body of the scaffold, we'll use the tab bar view. The children will require 3 widgets. We will put a container orange accent home, and now you see we have an error because we need to have 3 widgets. The second one will be red accent with the icon setting, and then orange accent with the person icon. And now you have access to a tab bar widget inside Flutter. The tab page selector. If you need to show the current page with dots like this at the bottom, you can use the tab page selector widget. First thing first, we will create a list of widgets, and inside we will put 3 different icons. Next, we will need to use the with single ticker provider state mixin. After, we will create a controller and an index set as 0. In the init state, we will set the controller to a tab controller. The length will be the widgets.length. The initial index will be the current index value. You will also need the vsync this, which is accessible because we use the single ticker provider state mixin. Because we use the controller, we also need to dispose this controller. With this, we can go inside a scaffold widget, create a stack widget with the alignment center. Inside the children, we will use the tab bar view. The controller will be the controller we just created. The children will be the widgets, which is a list of icons. Then we need to create a positioned widget. The bottom will be 40. This is just the location for the tab page selector widget. The controller will also be the same controller. The color will be black 38. And then we can create a floating action button, which will use the bottom bar. This one will be used to change pages. So inside the children, we will create a floating action button .small. The onPress will have a condition. If it's not the last index, then add 1 and change page. Otherwise, reset everything and put the index as 0. Then we will use the controller to animate into the next index. With an icon, the over elevation will be 0 and the elevation 0 also. And with all this, you have created the tab page selector widget, the table widget. This is what it looked like, and I will show you how to create this right now. First, we use a center and a padding widget. Inside, we use the table widget. The border will be table border.all with the color white 30. The default vertical alignment will be in the middle. The children will start with the table row. The decoration will be a box decoration with the color red accent. This will be the color of the first table row. Inside this one, we have multiple children. We will use the table cell. In the child, we use a padding widget with the child text title 1. This is the first cell you can see on the screen. We will also add 2 other table cells, and I will save the application. Now what I will do is after the table row, I will create a list of multiple table rows. By doing list.generate with 20 items, each of them will be a table row. The children will be 3 table cells with the text cell 1, 2, and 3. And now you have access to a table in your app. If you want to make sure that this list is scrollable, you can wrap everything with the single child scroll view. And now you will have a scrollable table inside your app. The text widget. This is one of the most common widgets, but I will try to give you some tips that maybe you don't know. By example, how to put 3 dots if the text is way too long. For this, we will work inside a center widget with a padding, and the child will be the text widget. The text will be, this is a text which is pretty long. You can change the text alignment if you want, and you can use the overflow, text overflow ellipsis, which is useful if the text is way bigger than the size of the screen. So to show you how this is working, I will change the style of the text. The font weight will be bold, the word spacing will be 2, the letter spacing will be 2, and the font size will be 30. And because we use the ellipsis, you can see that we have 3 dots because the text is not able to enter in the screen. This was the text widget. The text button widget. I will show you how to use this and also how to create a button with a gradient background. Inside the center widget, we will start with a column. The children will be the text button. You can change the style by recalling the text button, the style from, and change the text style for font size 20. The onPress of the first button will be null, and the child will be disabled. You can see this button is not clickable. After, I will space this with a sized box 30, and I will create another text button, but this one will have an empty function. You can see that this one is clickable. And now, how do we create a gradient button? First, we create a sized box height 30, and then after we use the clip rrec widget. The border radius will be circular 5, and the child is a stack widget. Inside the stack, we use the positioned.fill. and we put a container with the decoration, box decoration, gradient, linear gradient. The colors will be 3 different kinds of blue. And inside the stack, we will also put a text button. You can see that this creates a button with a gradient background. The text field widget. In this example, I will show you how you can create a text field, and also when the user press enter, you will see the information right under. To create this, we start with a text editing controller called controller. The string will be a text with nothing inside. With this, we can create an init state to set the controller to the text editing controller. Since we use the controller, we need to also dispose it. In the center widget, we will create a padding with the edge and sets 8. The child will be a column widget, and inside this children, you will have the text field widget. The controller will be the controller we created. The onSubmit will give you the information enter inside this text field. And with this, you can set state and set the text to the controller.text. After this, inside the column, you can add a sized box and a text with the text inside. So now if I write hello Flutter and I press enter, this is what you will see on the screen. The text form field widget. This is the application you will have at the end. We will start by creating a variable titles, which is a list of string. Then inside a single child scroll view, we will create the form widget. We will make sure that the auto-validate mode is always. And then every time we change something inside the form, this will set state and trigger the form.of primary focus.context.save. You will see later why we use this. Next, inside the child of the form, we will create a column widget. The children will be a list.generate. We will create 3 items, and each of them will have a padding and a child column. Inside this one, we will create text form field widget, which inside will use the onSaved. This is a function that will be triggered every time we save the form. And inside we will receive the value and say if the value is not null, then the title of the current index will be equal to this value. This is why we can see the text right under at the same time as the user is writing information. After we will create a sized box, and secondly, we will create a card widget. This one will have a padding, and the child will be a text title of the current index. And so now, every time you start to write something, this will trigger the onChange function of the form widget, which will set state and trigger the save. Once the save is triggered, this will trigger the onSaved from the text form field, which at the same time will change the value written inside the card widget. And this was the text form field widget. The text span widget. You can see that in one line of text, we have 2 different styles. And this is because inside the center widget, we use the text.rich. Inside we can put a text span, and the style will be the default text style, which is a text style with the font size 25. We will also add a color blue-gray, and then on the text argument, we will say Flutter. You can also put inside the text span children, which in this case, we will also put another text span inside, put the text to the moon, and we will override the style by using the text style fontweight.bold. This is what you have on the screen right now. If you add a color, this will override this blue-gray color. And now this is what you will have. The theme data. Inside the material app, you have something called the theme argument. And inside you can put the theme data. And this is what we will talk about. First, inside the home, the only thing we have is a scaffold widget. And this is what you can see on the screen. So what will happen if we play with the theme data? You can change the brightness by using brightness.dark. This will automatically change the brightness of the app. You can also change the scaffold background color, by example, red accent, and the primary color, let's say colors.orange accent. But keep in mind that you can change the theme of multiple things inside your app. So now, how can we access the primary color from the scaffold? We will start by creating in the body a sized box infinity, and then we will change the color by using the theme.ofContext.primary color. And this will access the information from the theme data. The last thing I want to show you is if you want to have the dark theme application, you have also something called the dark theme argument, which you can use to create an application switching between the light and the dark theme. This was the theme data widget for your Flutter app. The toggle button widget. This is what you will be able to create at the end. We start by creating a list of Boolean isSelect. All of them will be false when we start. Then inside the center widget, we use the toggle buttons. The children will be 3 different icons: home, setting, and person. The onPress function will return you the new index, which you can set state and set the isSelect with the current index to the invert of the isSelect from the same index. The last thing you need is to put the list of Boolean inside the isSelect. And just like this, you created the toggle buttons widget. The tooltip widget. As you can see, we have an image, and when I press long enough, you will see a message, "This is an image." We can create this by using a center widget. The child will be a tooltip widget. The message will be, "This is an image." And finally, in the child, you can put any widget. I will use an image. And just like this, when you press long enough on the image, you will see the tooltip widget. The transform widget. This image has been rotated 45 degrees, and this is because we use inside a center widget the transform widget. The alignment will be centered, and the transform will use the matrix 4.rotation z, and inside we will put pi times 1/4. The child will be an image asset. And you can see that if I change the angle for 1/2, the image will be rotated 90 degrees. The Tween Animation Builder widget. When I press on this icon, this will change the size and animate the transition. Let's create this by first creating a target value at 100. In the center widget, we will use the Tween Animation Builder. The tween will be a tween double, which we put the begin at 0 and the end with the target value we just created. The duration will be 500 milliseconds. And the builder will return an icon button. The icon size will be determined by the size, and the color will have the color orange. The icon will be the Flutter dash. Finally, the onPress will have the set state. This one will change the target value. If the target value is currently equal to 100, then it will be 250. Otherwise, it will be 100. And now when you press on this icon button, you can see a little animation. The Value Listenable Builder widget. On the screen, we have a simple counter app, but we don't even use the set state. And I will show you how to create this with the Value Listenable Builder. First, we need to create a value notifier int called number. This one is equal to a value notifier, which we start at 0. In the center widget, we create a column. In the children, we will put an icon button. When we press on this, as I told you, we will not use the set state. We will just say number.value plus 1. And the icon will be an icon add. After this, we will create a sized box height 30 and a value listenable builder. The value listenable will be the number. The builder will return a text widget, and this text will display the value. The style will be font size 30. And with all this code, we are able to create a counter app without using the set state. The vertical divider widget. This is what we will create. First, inside a padding widget, we create a row. The children will have first an expanded widget. Then we will create the vertical divider. The width will be 40, the thickness 1, the indent 40. This is just the space between the top and the vertical divider. The end indent will be 100. This one is the bottom space. The color will be gray. After this, we will create another expanded widget. And you can see in the middle, we have the vertical divider widget. The visibility widget. When I press on this button, this will show and hide the image at the bottom. We start with the isVisible boolean set as true. In the center and the column widget, we will create the children. The first one is a text button. When we press on this, this will set state and change the boolean value for the invert. If it's true, it will be false. If it's false, it will be true. The child will be a text show and hide. After this, we create another widget, the image asset, then a sized box 30, and finally, we will use the visibility widget. The visible argument will use the variable boolean we created, and the child will be an image asset. And now, when you press on the button, this will hide and show the image at the bottom. The Will Pop Scope widget. When I go inside a second page and I try to come back with the arrow Android button, this doesn't work because I use the Will Pop Scope widget. Let me show you how to create this. First, inside a center widget, we create an elevated button. The onPress will just trigger another page, which is called the next page. This is the class. Next, I will also add a child text next page. So when I click on this elevated button, we go inside this page. And this one will have the Will Pop Scope widget. The child will be a scaffold widget. The background color will be blue. The app bar will be a title text next page. And the body will be a center widget. The onWillPop will have a function and we will just return false. So now if I click on next page, you will see that this button is blocked, but also this one. So what we can do to solve this problem, we can change the leading for an icon button. When we press on this, we trigger the navigator.pop and the icon will be arrow back. Now if I click on the button, we can go back in the first page. And the bottom will pop scope is still blocked. The only reason why the button is blocked is because we returned the value false. This was the will pop scope widget. The wrap widget. This one is like a row, but each element over the screen will go right under. And to create this, we start with a padding, a center widget. The child will be a wrap. The spacing will be 10. This is the space between each widget. The run spacing will be 5. This is the additional space between each of them. And the children will be a list.generate. Inside we will put 10 items, and each of them will be a chip widget. You can see that if I change the run spacing for 50 and I save, this will put a bigger space between each line of widget. And this was the wrap widget. The safe area widget. On the application right now, we have a text behind the status bar because we don't use the app bar. But the safe area widget will make sure that this never happens. And to use it, the only thing you need is to wrap the text widget with the safe area. And now you can see that the text is right under the status bar. This was the safe area widget. And this was 215 widgets. Now if you see this outro, why don't we do a prank? Let's write in the comment, you forgot the Mooner widget. So everyone that will read the comment will be like, what's going on? What's this widget? That's it for this one. See you in the next video. Bye.